Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Creative City Network of Canada's Cultural Resilience Training session with the wonderful Grégoire Gagnon. So I'd like to start off by doing a land acknowledgement. If you just bear with me for one moment. So we acknowledge that our work in Canada's cultural sector takes place on the traditional territory of many nations, and that the CCNC head office is located on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe peoples. To the Indigenous culture workers and artists of this land, we thank you for the work you do in this sector, coast to coast to coast. First Nations, Inuit, and Métis cultures are a vital part of understanding the tapestry of culture across Turtle Island. The Creative City Network of Canada maintains a focus on supporting municipalities in their work towards reconciliation. And I'm coming to you from the traditional lands of the Chemainus First Nation in the Coast Salish area of this great land. So thank you again, all of you, for being here today. And I just want to introduce a couple of, well, at least introduce my colleague, Kate Littlejohn. Kate is managing our sort of back end today. So if there are, some issues or problems, you can, let us know in the chat. And I also want to encourage you all to put your name and your affiliation in the chat for us rather than go around the room. We've got over 50 people probably in the room today, so that's a lot to spend time going through all of that. So if you put your name and your affiliation and maybe even what you'd like to see getting out of today's presentation, that would be terrific. So please go ahead and start filling in the chat with your name and your affiliation. That would be just great. So the Cultural Resilience Project is an amazing project that CCNC took on a few years ago and started a few years ago. It's not really a municipal project so much as it is a project where we were looking at the entire Canadian culture sector from the point of view of what people did in order to get through the pandemic, whatever that might have been, closing down or changing things. And when we conceived of this idea, because what were we going to do during the pandemic when we couldn't connect with our colleagues? The first person I called was Grégoire Gagnon from the Cultural Human Resources Council, and we talked about the idea of putting together this program. And the reason why I talked to Greg was because I knew that CHRC would be a great organization to put this training piece together. And Greg has done a fantastic job, and we're very, very pleased. And so far, we've been to, I think, a dozen cities, is it, Greg, across the country? About a dozen cities across the country live. And we actually do have a couple more live sessions happening in April for the Francophone communities in Quebec. So if you know anybody from Francophone communities across the country, actually, please let them know that this is coming. We don't have an actual date yet, but it'll be sometime in April. So thanks very much for being here. We've got a nice, 20 people so far. I know that there'll be a few more people that'll be joining us as time goes on. And that's just great. And I'm going to hand it over to Greg to start the process. Oh, sorry, just one more thing. I just wanted to remind you that this session is being recorded and we are live on YouTube. So just so you know, that is the case. You have had to say yes. If you're in the room, you've had to say yes, that you understand that. But just to be very, very clear, this is a live presentation. It is available to those who've signed up for this presentation. But in the future, we will be using this presentation as a training tool. So just to let you know that. Okay, thanks very much, Greg.
Hello, everybody. Good morning to some. Good afternoon to others. I love these national calls. And yes, about the online version here and the live streaming. CCNC also had me sign a disclaimer that I wouldn't be putting up too many dad jokes throughout the presentation because we want to use this as a training tool. So welcome everybody. It's great to have so many people on. Just so that we can ensure a real flow here. The first segment, which is going to be roughly 60 minutes, maybe 65 if I run a bit long. We encourage, if you have burning questions about something that was said that was unclear, if you want to ask those on the material that's being presented. But otherwise, if we could save questions or discussion points for the second and third hours, where we will have a little more interaction. There is a lot of material to cover. Kathleen and the CCNC project was just amazing, and it brought out a lot of stuff basically. So we want to get through that first part, which is a little more, I'll say, academic, a little more of a presentation, and then the second part and third part where we'll have more discussions and some hands-on work to do. We've had to modify the live version of this to go back to what we were getting used to, a year or two ago in terms of online presentations. But welcome everybody who's on Zoom right now, and welcome everybody who's watching us on YouTube. And we look forward to all this material and to discussions that will happen a bit later. So Kathleen gave us a bit of a brief on Creative City Network, and I think most of you are familiar with the organization. Wonderful organization that does a lot of work across the country. I was so happy when Kathleen reached out, and I still remember that phone call saying, "Hey, I'd like to do this." We got some learning outcomes that'll come of this pandemic and what people have done. And Kathleen was absolutely right and spot on. And there's so much to be, I'll say, learned or shared throughout this project. And all of these resources are available for free. You can access the report that came out of the first part of the project. And if you want this entire slide deck presentation, you're more than welcome to it. We're not trying to hold anything back. It's really just out there for anybody who can find uses for this stuff. Uh, Cultural Human Resources Council. What are we? What do we do? We're sometimes a little nebulous, very small, but I'll say mighty shop. We have a national reach. We're a registered arts service organization with charitable status, and our mission is really to strengthen the Canadian cultural workforce through any means we can, finding solutions, resources, tools, anything that will better the HR environment. And so I think this was a really good fit in terms of developing professional development for folks that are working out there in the field. CHRC provides a whole bunch of things, and it's a really broad catchment because we're interested in all the subsectors, all of the occupations, whether it's on the employer, employee, independent contractor side. So it is a big and broad audience, and it's fun to work with. That does mean that we need to find solutions that apply to a majority, and a lot of the work that we're talking about today is finding generalities throughout these very unique and particular stories that were gathered through the first phase of the project. And we do everything at CHRC in both languages. Alors, si jamais vous voulez une version en français, c'est aussi disponible sur demande. The fellow that's going to be speaking for the next little while here, Greg Gagnon, not surprising, trajectory, did a lot of studies in music, did a lot of teaching, and now full-time manager for the Cultural Human Resources Council as the executive director. And I get to do some fun stuff like this sometimes where I get to present and chat with the audiences. So I really do not like reading off PowerPoint slides like a teleprompter. So I'm going to do my best not to read verbatim. There are only a few slides in today's presentation that I think are really worth reading word for word, but otherwise I try to talk around it. So I won't be reading this giant paragraph here. Oh, sorry, went too far ahead. This project, very aptly titled at first Cultural Resilience, Using Innovation to Stabilize in Times of Crisis. At first, we were thinking that, or at least in Kathleen's mind, that people were really going to be innovating and doing different things to basically survive throughout the pandemic. But when we were looking through the stories, we realized that it wasn't always innovation, but I'll save that for later. The project in two parts had the first part, which was a big piece of research by Kelly Hill and Hill Strategies, where they gathered above 200 stories, just under 300, so we can use that as our number, our 300 stories that were submitted through online national calls that people just wrote in. Sometimes some of these stories that we got were one line, like we went online. That was their story. It was a little short. Some of them were a little more generous in what they provided as context or content, And those stories from the 300, 29 were pursued in in-depth interviews um, that all show up now in a report that Kelly Hill has published for this project. And that was the basic material that we used after that for part two, the professional development piece. But it's not just CCNC and CHRC that have been on this. We also had the Canadian Commission for UNESCO and a sister organization to Creative City Network of Canada, Les Arts et la Ville. So with these great project partners, we were able to, move this project to the deliverables, and it's coming to a close. Unfortunately, we're getting to the end. Uh, so just rapidly, phase one, this report is available for free. There's a website that you can also consult with most of the 300 submissions. So that some of those show up as smaller paragraphs, but there are 29 stories that were pursued. And Kelly Hill and his team got together and developed or pulled out these 12 key themes that were just awesome things that happened and ways of seeing how people innovated or adapted throughout the pandemic. And if I just take two of these, which are very representative of some of the things that we've seen, small can be mighty. Some of the small organizations were very nimble and decided to be ambitious and to look at those horizons and try different things and new things, and really made an impact. Another theme that comes back a lot throughout the 29 or the 300 stories is sometimes just jump. In every case that we saw, there was some form of risk, and people said, you know what, let's give it a try. So that let's put faith in the process and the thinking that went around it, and say, let's give this a try. So these 12 themes, great inspirational material, and I encourage anybody who wants to download the study. The stories that were pursued, the 29, are all in a 3 or 4 page format, very succinct and well edited, so that you get the material you want from it. Um, Beautiful, inspiring stories. So I encourage everybody to read those. Now, phase two, I must say, initially I thought, oh, this will be easy. We'll just grab some of these great stories and we'll just talk about the certain things that came out of them, and then we'll just present it to people. It turned out to be a little more of a challenge at the onset into figuring out how we could take the 300 individual unique stories and build them into uh, both a written document that would allow people to be more resilient, and also into a live presentation that would help people go from not knowing a lot of these, I'll say, frameworks and theoretical pieces, towards making these actionable things that could be living documents and resources for organizations. So the goal is really, in phase two, professional development, to help organizations continue delivering and producing cultural goods and services, no matter what future challenge they might face or wherever that challenge comes from. So, to achieve this, we really want folks that are operating in organizations um, to get stronger points of knowledge, to be able to rationally address any challenges that show up, whether they do so by adaptation or innovation. And if we remember, the name of this was innovating to stabilize, but we realized that there was a lot of adaptation going on, that it wasn't always innovation. Anyways, we'll talk about that at length today, so that folks can figure out the most efficient route to continued production and to remain a going concern. Now, this presentation relies on some interesting acronyms and frameworks. Amongst these, there is the PESTLE, Profity, McKinsey 7S. We've got the business model canvas, and we also developed a new one that's kind of a catch-all for all of this. It sounds like a barbaric acronym: MVOV GAMP DARI POCA. So we'll get to that shortly. And just so that we're clear on timekeeping here today, there are three parts. A little more than an hour probably for this initial part, so we should be done somewhere around 1, maybe 1:05, 1:10 Eastern Daylight Time. So we will look at the professional development research methodology, the process, and the questions that went into preparing this. And then part two, we will actually apply these frameworks that you'll either be learning about or that you already know about, and you'll be able to just spend some time working on them in groups. And then the third part, a little bit ominous, but we do want to open up the floor to more discussions on what if, because now that we've faced this challenge that was a health crisis, political crisis, social crisis, operational crisis, what could be the next source of challenge that we would have to face, and how could we best face it? So it'll be a little more open to discussion at that point. And I think we also have somebody who's in the room who will be able to talk to us about their challenge that they faced and how they faced it. So for those of you that are thinking, I'd like to grab a sandwich at some point, or fix a salad and or maybe do some yoga, the first part would probably be the best. I'd say keep an ear out, keep your screen up in front of you, but less chances of interaction. So this is the right time if you've got something that you need to do on the side, because part two you'll actually be interacting with folks. So it'll be a little harder to nibble on that sandwich or those carrot sticks. So going into this, like I said, uh, we had over 200 submissions, so 200 unique stories, close to 300. It's really tricky to figure out how we can find those common threads. And so we were looking at different ways of approaching it, and it really boiled down to four major questions. Now, these four questions were not always answered in every one of these stories, but they are the kind of high level elements that we can look at and that we can use moving forward and evaluating the historical pieces in terms of backdrops that we can really understand and have a common speaking points. So in the 200 plus submissions, we can see where the resilience effort appeared in an organization by using the business model canvas. And if you're not familiar with that, by the end of this hour, you will be pros at this one theoretical framework. The other question is how the resilience was demonstrated, and we identified this within the business model canvas grid in terms of adaptation, doing things differently, or innovation, doing different things, and that shows up. So we've got 300 stories. We've got the business model canvas, which is 9 blocks. We were able to populate some of these blocks with DDT or DTD, and those who grow up in the 80s, like I did, we're not talking about the wrestling DDT. I don't remember what the move was, but I just remember the name. So was it innovation or adaptation that was represented in the story? Another very common thing that would come up would be who spearheaded or championed the resilience effort, because for anything to get done, somebody has to have that initiative and impetus. So we want to look at some common leadership types, roles, and governance models that may have affected positively or negatively and may affect positively or negatively in the future. The other big piece, and being an HR outfit, we're really interested in the skill sets that were fostered and the resources, including the human resources that would have been part of any resilience effort. So the questions: where does the effort appear? How does it appear? Who spearheaded it? And what resources were used in this resilience effort? Sorry, too fast. So just a kind of a long list of things that we're going to be talking about, and most of these are in the first hour. So we will look at some definitions, and I go pretty fast. So again, if there's a burning question, something that was completely unclear, please let us know through the chat, or raise your hand, please, so that Kathleen or Kate can grab that, because I can't see everybody on screen right now. So I'll rely on them to interrupt me at the right moments. So we will look at the definitions of resilience, innovation, adaptation, sustainability, which is a really important topic today. We will look at understanding cultural organization life cycles and change management and crisis management notions, leadership, style, types, and governance, which can have such an impact on anything we want to do within an organization. And before the end of the first part, we will look at the business model canvas, which is a wonderful framework. If you haven't heard about it, I use it now in everything almost daily. And in part two, we'll look at these other frameworks. So I believe we have a poll coming up, which will ask you. So Kate, whenever you're ready to do that, if you're familiar with any of these frameworks, or if you've ever used them, just to get a sense of whether you've come across them or not. Um, some of you may know the business model canvas. McKinsey 7S is a little less known, but some folks have worked with it. If you have ever heard of MVOV GAMP Dari Polka, then you have been in one of these presentations before. Pestle analysis is relatively well known. Profity is sometimes a little nebulous, and if you have any others that you think would be useful, we'd love to hear from you through this poll. So I think I have to answer, otherwise it's not going to close the poll. So I guess I have to say that I've seen all of these except other. I'll submit my answers as well, make sure that we keep smooth with that. So while we're getting that poll tabulated, and Kate, let me know whenever we've got response on that. Definitions. So some of you may think this is a bit of academic to start with, but it really helps kind of ensure that we're all talking about the same thing. Resilience, what does that mean? You can have a whole bunch of different definitions, and so we went with two dictionary definitions, Merriam-Webster and Oxford. But the ability to adjust or recover from misfortune or change, or the ability to recover quickly from something unpleasant, such as shock or injury. I think most would agree that the pandemic had some form of misfortune or at least change, and that in many cases it was unpleasant, and for many it was a shock and or some form of injury to their organization. So resilience, really, we can see it. Something has happened, and we've gotten across or gotten beyond it. I see the poll results are up. So we do have a third of people that have seen the business model canvas before, and yeah, quite a few have seen. Oh, so we do have some people that have been in previous presentations, because the MVOV Gamp Dari Polka shows up here. Cool. This isn't entirely new, but I don't think yeah, none of them are 100% known. So everybody will walk away with something from today.
I think it's you, Greg, that knows the MVOV Gamp Dairy Polka.
Oh, am I the 9%?
Yeah. One of 11.
Well, I can attest that I was in the previous sessions on this topic. So I guess that would be me. Awesome. Thank you for that. Meanwhile, while I'm just walking through some of the definitions, I think we also had another poll about uh, who's coming from where. We had some demographic questions that were part of a poll. So I'll let Katie put that one up. And hopefully you don't mind my talking over this, but what area of culture do you work in? Are you organizational leadership, management administration? Are you an artist? Are you part of a consulting firm or your own independent consultant? Are you a municipal cultural worker or some other area of industry? So we'll let you answer that while I continue on here, because this is something that I've said now two or three times just to make sure that it's been driven home. I guess I should also answer this. Organizational management. Here we go. Um, Initially we'd set out thinking that innovation was what helped people get through it, but we realized through a lot of the stories that people weren't necessarily innovating, they were adapting. So we adapted our own deliverable here and included adaptation as part of the reference material. So when we're talking about innovation, we're really introducing something new, something that wasn't there before, versus adaptation, where we're adjusting according to environmental change or modification. And in many cases, that was the fit that worked with people. They decided that they had a whole bunch of great things, but they couldn't deliver a certain way, so they adapted what they were doing. And in some cases, I would say not the majority, there really was something new and innovative that came out of their initiatives. So we have many organizational leaders, managers, and administrators on the call, a few consultants and municipal cultural workers, and some artists. So everything here is useful. Everything that we're talking about should be useful to you and your practice, regardless of your area of work. So thanks for those polls, Katie. Uh, the other big thing that's just floating around all the time we hear about it, it's impossible to go a full day without seeing or hearing about sustainability. And that was front and center for everybody who was going through the pandemic. I'm generalizing here, but I think pretty much everybody wanted to be able to meet the needs of today without forsaking tomorrow. And that's also part of kind of how we were looking at the success piece, because a lot of people didn't make it through. A lot of people suffered some pretty nasty times in the pandemic, and we don't want to belittle that, but we just want to remind everybody that the objective here is that we're looking at tools that will help us be more resilient, and how to address situations and to rationally think about where the problems are and the solutions that we can articulate towards them. So the sustainability piece is obviously very important and a part of all of this discussion. Cultural organization life cycles, very, very rapidly here. This is not, this is, I won't say it's not rocket science. And we've all, through our organizations or our careers, seen this. Organizations have to start somewhere, they grow. We aim to get to a maturity. And at some point, there's something that's going to happen, which is either going to bring us into a decline or we have to head towards a renewal. And the perfectly natural, sorry, that's the word death here, but sunsetting could be another term that we could use. And I invite you all to think about where your organization is in terms of this life cycle. Now, this does have an impact on the resilience effort because some organizations, if we look at mature organizations, typically they have more assets or a stronger history. They have more to fall back on in terms of facing challenges versus an organization that's maybe at a birth or a growth stage. They may have all their assets or all of their resources tied up in what they are developing, so there could be some vulnerabilities on either side. A mature organization may be set in its ways and have trouble doing something new. So when a new challenge comes in, they're not necessarily uh, in the right mind frame to start thinking about innovating or adapting. Versus an organization that's in a birth or a growth phase is most likely putting out fires every day. So it's just one more thing to think about, but they're already in problem solving mode. So organizations that were in that either birth or growth might have been a little more nimble in that process and engaging immediately in change management or innovation versus a mature organization. This can also really affect the level of interaction with governance and senior management. Typically, an organization that's either in a birth or a growth phase has a lot of oversight from the governance or whoever is the governing body, most likely a board of directors. And the board of directors tend to be a little more hands-on when there's some form of a decline or we need to head towards a renewal, versus when there's a maturity phase. Typically, they're a little more hands-off and let senior staff or staff manage and coast through different times. So this does have an impact on the ability to manage change. So change management was something that obviously was part of this because we're either changing something that we were doing before or we were heading towards something new. So there is that element of change regardless, unless somebody said, you know what, we're just going to stop doing anything and we're just going to wait for this pandemic to be over. So whether it's direct, indirect, whether we're really, engaging in the change, we're flexible, we're tolerant, intolerant, it's just different ways of seeing that level of engagement in terms of change management. And throughout the 300 stories, we saw a lot of things where people were reflecting on their set path, their habits, their loyalties, and traditions. And all of these things could be subject to change throughout the resilience effort. And one thing that I think was pretty common throughout is and we could see this in the future as well. And if we consulted some peer-reviewed literature, we would definitely be able to confirm this without any difficulty. But the ability to manage change stemming from either interpersonal skills or from a technological or hard skills base or set, there's certainly a correlation that could be drawn between that degree of mastery in change management and the actual effectiveness of the change management outcome. So you may be thinking of examples of that you might have seen throughout the pandemic or yourselves in your own organizations. This is an important consideration here. Crisis stages and identification. Now, whether we call it a crisis or a challenge, however we want to see it, there are generally these 6 steps. Pre-crisis, everything's hunky-dory, we're just moving along, and then all of a sudden, boom, something happens. I believe it was March 13th, 2020, where pretty much everything ground to a halt. So we've got a trigger, there's an event, and from that moment on, we want to get as rapidly as possible to exiting the crisis. So there's the crisis unfolding, and so long as we're not doing something to address the crisis unfolds, or the impact or the challenge, however we want to see it. Eventually, we can articulate solutions that will bring us to a stabilization, which was also part of the title, innovation to stabilize. And that stabilization, we can either remain in a stable mode or we can exit the crisis in potentially a growth. Reporting can or cannot be done. In this case, this actual broadcast is part of reporting on crisis and identifying different elements of it. Now, this part's not peer reviewed, but I think it's really hard to find a flaw in the thinking here. If you really want to exit the crisis rapidly or you want to stabilize, you really need to fix what's not working. So 3 questions can really really reduce the amount of time that you'll need to figure out the solution to the problem because you have found the breadth of the problem and the depth of the problem. So if you're thinking about the problem in terms of breadth, how wide is it, affecting us? Is it just a function or unit within our organization? Is it an entire department, or is it the entire organization? So how big is this effect? The depth of the crisis, is it, just something annoying, something mild? Is it serious? Is it crippling, or is it a disaster scenario? If an entire continent was wiped out because of the meteorite, well, it's pretty much disaster. There's not, we won't be thinking about, oh, are we going to put that show on next week? No, we're going to be thinking about, let's find water and food. And the temporality of the crisis, is it ephemeral? Is it recurring or ongoing? Now, if I can provide a CHRC pretty easy example, we were already online and a virtual organization before the pandemic started. So when we were told stay home, no more going to the office, we said okay, we were already home. But it did affect check signing because, like most not-for-profits, we need two signatures. So the impact of the restrictions and the pandemic were very functional. We needed to get two people to sign, and we needed physical signatures because we were just not in 2020 in terms of banking yet. So we would have, and so this was, I'll say, serious when paychecks came around, but otherwise it was just a mild irritant. But it was recurring because it wasn't a every day problem. It was a every 2 week problem because we had to pay staff and pay suppliers and whatnot. So we were, well, it's pretty easy to identify. In this case, we needed the bookkeeper to go to the treasurer's house, get to the treasurer's house, have the treasurer sign the checks. I would join in the driveway, countersign the checks. The bookkeeper would go back home and mail the checks out. So we had a small functional or unit problem, which had, some mild to serious depth, and the temporality obviously was recurring. But we were able to articulate a solution that went with it, which was okay, we're not allowed to meet in person, but we can sign checks on the hood of a car or let somebody walk into their house with them. So we were able to find a solution that worked with the problem. Now, another way of thinking about this and why it's good to think about this is that if you are looking for a temporary solution to a permanent problem, you will constantly be re-articulating solution or repeating the solution. It's not strong enough. If you're imposing a permanent solution to a temporary problem, it's a little heavy-handed. And if you're using a disaster depth solution to a mild problem, then you're probably, again, too heavy-handed. So this can really help you figure out, how much do I need to invest in this solution, or how wide does this solution have to reach? Can I break the big problem into smaller problems that each have solutions of their own? So this just really helps find the real, I'll say, source of the problem and how bad it is, how wide it's going to catch, so that you can articulate a solution to move faster from crisis unfolding to stabilization to exiting the crisis. Hope I'm not going too fast here. One of the things that I think we all saw at some point, and we heard about it either through the news or in our own networks, is that we didn't know how long the pandemic problem was going to last, but also how long the restrictions would be in place. So many people said, I'm not going to open up my theater because they're just going to shut me down again in 2 weeks. So the time that it's going to take for me to rev things back up is when I'm going to be ready to produce, and then they're going to shut it down again. So some restaurants, if we take the restaurant business, decided not to just reopen. They'd wait to make sure that the restrictions would be lifted for a longer period of time. So not knowing what the temporality of the crisis or the restrictions was really meant that people could not commit to a mitigating plan or stabilization plan rapidly because they just didn't know how long this would last. So that was, I think that's proof is in the pudding that we need to think about the temporality. I said that we would talk about leadership, and again, I'm going very fast because there's a lot of material, and we want to get you to familiar with the frameworks and applying them. But it's really hard to sidestep the leadership piece, and this is not peer reviewed, but I think most leadership documents or literature refers back to Hersey and Blanchard, who were kind of the great thinkers of this. And so you'll see sometimes four types of leaders, or four leadership styles, sometimes 10, 20, 25. There can be some big redundancies, but I think they're really fun to have. And they're a good to think about when we're in that situation where we're trying to find solutions and we're debating solutions. And eventually somebody's going to have to say, okay, well, we're going to make a decision. How does that decision come about? So 10 different leadership styles briefly. And again, when you get this presentation, you can click on any of these links and you can get a bit of a further explanation. But the autocratic leader, I am the one who will decide because I am boss or I am the leader. A transactional leader, somebody who says, I'm willing to do this for you, but what are you going to do for me? Bureaucratic leadership, this is how things are done because this is how the block is set up. Charismatic leadership, the schmoozers, the people that are always good at cajoling, and that's how they end up bringing people aboard. Transformational leaders and coaching leadership are I would say, quite similar, where you're there to elevate somebody to the next level. Your leadership will bring them something. Democratic leadership can also be very close to collaborative leadership. So we're looking for consensus or at least working together towards articulating solutions to in front of problems. Servant leadership, the leader is there to basically to serve, help the people that report to them. Laissez-faire leadership, not quite the same as servant leadership, where they'll just delegate everything and somebody else will have to take care of it, or I'm here, but I just leave the decisions down to others who report to me, just to caricature it slightly. And I encourage you to think about these, or to have these in mind whenever you're around a table and you're thinking, okay, well, is this the right leadership style that we need for this situation? Maybe we need another leadership style. And it's easier to identify the leadership style or to tell people around the room, sorry, I think we would need more of a collaborative leadership or democratic leadership than autocratic or bureaucratic in this case, whatever the situation may be. Now, like I said, most of these 10, 40, 20 lists that exist are based on Hersey and Blanchard's leadership styles. Telling people what to do, selling, getting people to participate, or delegating. So those are kind of the four high-level ones. But I like the list of 10 because it gives us a little more color to the content than just the four. Uh, Common characteristics, and you may recognize yourself in one, two, or three of these. I think people typically lean more towards one or the other, but in many cases, our leadership and organization management, administration, we have to wear all three hats at the same time, oftentimes. But what can be useful here is if we are thinking about presenting a new idea, we may have a vision, but we may not be the right person to articulate it and to generate that in a nuts and bolts kind of sense. And oftentimes we need somebody to present this and to sell it basically. So we need that the speaker. So I may have some really great ideas, but I'm not the best person to convince the others around the table to do it. So I might go and seek somebody who's got a little more of that speaker type of personality, and we obviously need people that accomplish stuff. If I was to say Steve Jobs, a lot of people know Steve Jobs, and some would say, oh, he was the speaker because he was the face of Apple for a long time. When you think about it, was he really so much the image of the organization, or was he the vision? He had those ideas. He certainly wasn't the person who was putting the iPhones together. So he needed groups that would have been accomplishers that were there to the task-oriented folks to deploy and make sure that things got done. He was a bit of a speaker, obviously, but we most often see speakers of the, I'll say, political type, the folks that are there that have a team to help them out, but they are the most eloquent and the ones who will really, get people impassioned about things. So these three types of leaders would have typical characteristics. And again, this is not peer reviewed, but it's just kind of a tableau where we can think about, okay, so in terms of hard skills, typically that would show up on the accomplisher side versus the charismatic side would probably be more the speaker, and the vision or innovativeness or intuitiveness would fall under the thinker, would be the visionary. We spoke, well, I spoke briefly about governance earlier, and that can be very intimately tied to the life cycle of an organization. Uh, Five different types of governance, or five models that are pretty common. Cooperative. Everybody's a VP of something, and typically they're a little more hands-on. Or management team, where there's no senior staff or no staff at all, where everybody on the board is doing something in terms of operations, so they manage directly. If I skip to policy, the governance model works by edicts. We give you a certain, leeway. You have to operate within this leeway and execute. Advisory, which is probably my favorite, the board that says, call us when you need us. We'll take care of the kind of legal entity stuff, the very corporate side of things, but call us when you need help for something and we'll be there and we'll advise you. Typically, they would have specific skill sets that you could lean on as an ED or a GM. So speaking from the executive director perspective or GM perspective, I think that's our favorite, but I can't speak for everybody, obviously. The other model that we see is patron, the folks that have deep pockets or have networks of folks that have deep pockets, the people that manage to get fundraising done or buy some deals off on the golf course. I think that's another one that we enjoy. They can be very hands off if they are committed to how they've brought the money into the organization. They want to see how it's spent, but they can also be very hands off where they're very tied to the cause and just really want the cause to keep going because nonprofits or charities would be tied to a mission and objectives. So this can obviously impact the ability to be resilient, try new things, innovate, adapt. Because if you've got, let's say, a management team, then you probably have more people that you're consulting versus if you've got an advisory board, they would allow more leeway to senior staff and personnel. So there is definitely a trade-off between the involvement of a larger deciding body or some form of consultation or cooperative approach can most likely slow down the pace of change or adaptation or innovation. But the trade-off for that is that you get more people thinking around the same ideas and you can generate potentially more momentum. And you can also have more people around the table to say, I think this is a bad idea because of X, Y, and Z, or X, Y, and Z. And so that you have that, you've got people to bounce ideas off of. If you've got less people to consult, you can usually be a little more nimble and operate more rapidly. Well, one of the things that we saw in the 300 stories is that most of them, the vast majority, had some form of we. It was a group. It wasn't just one person saying, very cavalier, I'm going to lead the charge and this is how we're going to do things. There were solo artists that could operate in, as rapidly as they wanted to. And we've got a great example of that coming up. But in the vast majority, it was great stories about people coming together and thinking about solutions together and finding things that worked for a broad number of people, not just I'll say a selfish intent. So that was a good feel good moment reading through those stories. Okay, business model canvas. This I was so happy to be able to use this for this piece of work. It really provides us with a nice kind of common understanding piece. And for those of you that do not know about the business model canvas, it is the product of a huge co-creation. There were 400 people paying into this project to be a part of it, create this tool, which is very, very user-friendly and highly visual. So it's very easy to engage with, whether you are thinking about starting up an organization, a company, a line of business, or whether you're thinking about changing your business model or changing part of your organization or business. There is a link at the bottom left here, BMC Explained. I think it's a 3-minute video, and you go from I have not heard about this to wow, I could tackle anything with this business model. I'll give you the 5-minute version just because I'm a little longer winded and I don't have the editing capacity right now. So the business model canvas is 9 blocks. In the traditional business model sense, they start with the customer segments. Who's paying for the products or services? Is it clients, customers, members? You should be able to identify that. A little note for not-for-profits, charities, you can also think about your beneficiaries, the people that are receiving potentially goods and services that might be free, that are paid for by somebody else, because we've got that 3-legged stool with the nonprofit or charity folks out there. So you should be able to separate the two. Who's actually paying and who's putting money into your coffers and who's benefiting from this? They could be seen in both cases as your customer segments. But I think, especially for not-for-profits, we have to think about our value proposition, the mission and objectives of the organization. What is it there? Why does it exist? What purpose does it serve? The channels. How do you get what your value proposition is to your customer segments? Your customer relationships. What kind of connection do you have with the people that are basically paying for your services? Are you a very close relationship? I don't know, you're an artist that produces paintings and you have that one-on-one relationship where you develop something for them, specifically for them, or you mass create stuff and you sell it online and you've never seen one of the people that purchases your art form ever. So there can be a decision there. This may be a little more nebulous for some folks when you come to think about it, but it's good to think about it. What kind of connection do I have with my customer segments? Revenue streams are there to capture the income or revenue from your customer segments that are accessing your value proposition through your different channels. The key activities, key resources, and key partnerships. It's impossible to make something or do something without consuming something else, transforming something, and making it into your value proposition delivery. And that's tied to the cost structure. So the highly visual aspect of this is that it is an actual canvas, and we will, I think they've already been sent out, but you can work on these directly. So your value proposition sits in the middle. This is the reason why we're doing all of this. On the right side of your canvas, you've got your customer segments, so the people that are paying for your services, and the channels obviously bridge the value proposition getting to the customer. All of that creates your revenue streams. So you've got that on the right side of the canvas. On the left side of the canvas is all the essential elements you need to actually deliver the value proposition. So you'll have key resources and key activities that transform resources to make your value proposition come alive. You can't do everything yourself. Rarely does an organization have everything from A to Z, so that you will typically have partners that you lean on. In a bit of a pedestrian example, I'd say you probably don't create your own internet or provide your own electricity for your organization. So you might want to list those two key partners as partners. If you are operating a theater, you may have artists or other people that come in. You don't necessarily have a stable or roster of those folks. You may need key partners to be able to come in and produce those key activities, which are theater productions, which create that cultural environment that people are paying for and that you're capturing the revenue. Now, the left side of your canvas is tied to all the things that cost you something, thus your cost structure. I pulled it off in 4 minutes. So uh, maybe a quick reaction on the reaction button. Thumbs up, you get the business model canvas. Thumbs down, you don't get the business model canvas. So I can't see everybody at the same time. If there are any thumbs down, I'm happy to reiterate or re-explain things. I do see at least one thumb up. Thanks, Kim. This is very, very easy to use, and it's a little less, I'll say, intimidating than something like the Porter's Five Forces or other business frameworks. This one can really help you really just parcel out the different elements that are tied to your organization. Thank you. So, Kate and Kathleen, no thumbs down. We've convinced them. Awesome. Thank you. So we will be applying this shortly. Uh, just to reiterate, I encourage you to think of your value proposition as your mission and objectives in support of the mission, and that your key activities are the deliverables or activities that make that value proposition a living thing. Some people would argue and say that the key activities, let's say I own a theater and my theater production is my value proposition. I'm not going to argue with people. If that's the way you see it, that's fine. This is the beauty of a democratic environment. You can choose to use this framework however you like, but I would encourage you to see that the fundamental reason why you exist as your value proposition. If we look at it, just a few of the stories and just a few more elements to kind of spill out here before we go into getting you to apply paper to pencil. Now that you'll be finished your yoga poses and munching on sandwiches. The findings and analysis, the demonstrations of resilience. So I chose a few stories that aren't part of the 29 that were highlighted by Kelly Hill's team, because they were interesting examples of how we can use the business model canvas to analyze the doing things differently, doing different things, innovation, adaptation, the skill sets, what resources were used. And so it does kind of tease out or foreshadow some of the other frameworks that we'll be using, including McKinsey 7S, BMC, MVOV, GAMP, Daripoka, and Profity. So they all have something unique, and well, obviously, I found them interesting. I hope you will find them too. I won't read this. Like I said, I don't want to use this as a teleprompter. But Vancouver cantata singers. Cantata singers, they sing, they make music. People show up to the show, pay their money, and that's basically the business model. We don't have to list out all of the key activities and all that. We I say we get the gist. But typically, their customer relationships are people come to see our shows. There's not much of an engagement piece there. But in this case, seeing as they couldn't have people come out to shows because, well, we weren't allowed to do shows, they engaged the public and asked for the public to submit stories and elements that would go into their production of videos and recordings of cantatas being sung. So they were putting other, folks' stories to music. So there was a bit of a change in the value proposition because the value proposition would normally be that they are bringing music to audiences, but in this case, the value proposition was also a channel through which people could interact or share. So there was a conscious change on, subtle change on the value proposition and a fair change on the customer relationships because this story demonstrates doing different things, DDT, in regards to the value proposition and the customer relationships, instead of limiting themselves, the cantata singers, to an online transition of their material and simply producing shows online, they asked for contributions from the audience and it went into the production. So the audience is participating in the artistic production, which is a bit off of their value proposition scale without necessarily going against it. They're still producing music. So it was doing different things in this case. Um, Another one here that really caught my eye, the haunted walks. So a lot of us know about, different cities, you'll have a haunted walk, a guided tour of some, historical spots and something happened there and there are ghosts tied to it and all that. So obviously during the pandemic and the restrictions, a lot of this could not happen. And then when it could happen, they had to go back to, smaller groups or family units, social distancing and all that. But they did develop, as many did, an online component. And for this online component, they had to go get some new partners. So they went and found the best ghost storytellers from around the world. I didn't know that existed as an occupation. Uh, you're welcome. Now that you know as well. So for those of you that might aspire to that, it is a thing. So that exists. But they had to go and get these key partners that they could now work with because they weren't restricted to a physical location to be able to do online streamed events and whatnot. But one of the things that really caught my eye that I thought was definitely noteworthy is that they would have spooky experiments using household objects. So through this interactive, possibly pre-recorded session, you might be afraid of your own household objects. Now, I'm very intrigued by this, but at the same time, I really don't want to, you know, shy away from my own utensil drawer and be scared of my spoons next time I have to, you know, make something in the kitchen. So I'm not sure if I want to access this, but it sounds like they did a lot of different things, and this would lead to us. The evaluation part of this, the analysis would be that it demonstrates adaptation on key activities. So there's haunted walks for smaller groups instead of bigger groups, as well as innovation on their value proposition because their value proposition was tied to haunted experiences in person and different specific locations. Now they were actually coming into your home and making you scared of your home. So there's a bit of a change in the value proposition here. They brought on new key partners, and they eventually opened up and said, "Look, we're going to find new customer segments." So they got audiences from abroad, which in turn provides new revenue streams. But this is an important analysis and findings piece: is that we weren't focusing on the outcome so much as we were focusing on what led to the outcome. And this is where a lot of the stories that people told us, we accessed this or we did that or this came about. And so the outcome was very interesting because it was the result. But we were interested for the professional development piece in what led to that outcome. What were the decisions that were made? So where does that resilience effort show up? Who led it? What was involved? And how did it show up within your organizations? This was one of the more high stories where it was a single artist who did some work but realized that they needed help, so they went and found some key partners. And for anybody in the Ottawa area, Mask Multicultural Arts in Schools and Communities, they're one of our neighbors, great organization, and so they extended some resources, financial, for this musician to be able to access new activities. So instead of teaching, in person and delivering concerts in person, did a mix of both, started amalgamating some things, producing new videos, interactive content with audience. But this person, Catherine Patricia Cobbler, who maybe somebody knows on this call, um, definitely relied on key resources, saying, you know what, I'm a good pedagogue, I'm a good musician, so I'm going to find other ways of bringing this to classrooms and to different audiences and students so that I can continue delivering. But this would require new key activities, recording and getting material from the audience, and also finding people that could help with the actual recording, editing, and all that. So this person, this is a good demonstration of the left side of the business model canvas, used some of their key resources, found new key activities and new key partners to be able to deliver, well, the value proposition, which was still, producing music and teaching music to kids. This is another one that is, it was just so unique that I just had to put it into this again as a demonstration. I think most of us have been to a festival or some form of outdoor fair at some point, and there are stilt walkers sometimes, and they're basically crowd amusement or entertainment. But there weren't many fairs or festivals happening during the pandemic because of the restrictions. So these folks were basically out of business until somebody realized that, hey, as things are opening up, we can use stilt walkers as crowd control. Because what happens if you've got a great gathering of people together and somebody's coming up 6 feet off the ground on stilts? You tend to kind of, spread out. So they used two key resources, one of them being actual stilts, the other one being the competency, the asset or the skill to walk on stilts. So they used two key resources in a different way to deliver a different value proposition. Instead of simply entertaining folks, they were used as social distancing or physical distancing officers, uh, and doing so in a more, I'll say, friendly or entertaining way. But their contract would have been, come and do some basically, crowd control for us in a shopping mall that is now allowed to open up to a certain capacity, but we need to keep everybody safe, versus come in and, entertain folks by the fact that you're 6 feet up on with makeup or whatnot. So I think this was a really good example of using those key resources, both on the skills side and the physical resources side, that's the actual stilts, and using another skill set, clowning around, to safely help people disperse. It also demonstrates a good adaptation because the walkers are still performing, but they're serving another purpose, fostering that public safety piece. So I hope that helps, how we've done the analysis and how you will be able to perform these analyses for yourselves and your organizations later on. This is another one, while I was delivering this presentation in Whitehorse, somebody in the room said, "Hey, this is my neighbor." So this actually happened. Now, this story has so much stuff happening inside of it that there's no way that I can tell it all in the minute that I have to do so. But basically, this is one of those stories where somebody said, "Okay, March 13th, everything's shut down, stay home, not allowed to go to work." So this person could no longer exhibit their artworks in a gallery, but said, you know what? I've got a property, I've got a house, and the property abuts to a walking trail. I'm going to set up my artwork at the end of at the end of my property, right beside the walking trail. Well, this person developed new customer segments by having the people that, were just out for a walk, and then all of a sudden they end up right there beside the exhibited art. So this is one of the things that this person did, which was a decision on the cost structure. I'm no longer going to invest in a gallery space when I can just use my own physical property. But this person also spearheaded some efforts to have outdoor concerts in ponds, people performing in canoes that could be watched from the side of the body of water. And it generated discussions on art and culture and its place within society. Is art a reflection of society, or should art generate conversation or move society forward? And so there's all of these things that were just tied to this big story. The person was very generous in recounting, and I encourage you to read the entire thing fully, but pulled off a whole bunch of different things. And it's a demonstration of, using key resources, that physical space, the outdoor space that that person had for themselves, and was readily available. So the person on March 14th was able to turn around and say, I'm going to continue delivering cultural goods and services, or artistic goods and services. And so this person was able to access new customer segments, because there were the people that are just walking by, and then all of a sudden, oh, they were a potential customer. Um, the customer relationships also changed, because this person is no longer just selling the art. It is part of conversation and ongoing discussions, and reflections on society and all this. So customer relationships shows up in black, because not only was it a decision, something that was changed by this person. I don't remember their name. Was it? We have their name? Nicole
Nicole,
Bauberger.
Nicole.
Nicole. Yeah, so Nicole made that conscious decision, which also became an outcome of that decision. So it shows up on both sides of the ledger, if we can. So I've highlighted that. Obviously, some dramatic changes in cost structure, because if she's no longer paying for gallery space, then that cost structure is positively affected. The value proposition, customer segment, key resources were all things that were used to innovate and to adapt. Okay, so as we're drawing towards the end of this first hour, I hope we haven't lost anybody along the way. Being an HR outfit, we are obviously interested in the skills side of things, and we talked a bit about these different things throughout. But when we're looking at innovation and adaptation, because we saw the examples of both, we do see some common skill sets. And again, this is not peer-reviewed literature, but I think it's pretty common sense at the intersection of both. So whether you're doing an adaptation or whether you're doing innovation, you will there's a demonstration of analysis, synthesis, critical thinking, leadership, communication, and risk management. That was really part of pretty much every story. There was some element of that tied to it. Now, on the innovation side, we attributed creativity, design, conceptualization, implementation, curiosity, and a more proactive stance to the folks that were leading an innovation effort, versus the adaptation side, where there's definitely a notion of practicality. So we have all this and we do this way. We need to adapt it, but we're not going to bring in something new. We're just going to tweak something. So there's a practical element tied to it. And in this case, change management, I think, is a little more fundamental to adaptation than innovation, because you're literally changing something by adapting it. And it's not to say that innovation isn't change management, but it fell a little more to the right side, in our humble opinion. There's definitely an open-mindedness element, because we have our set paths, our ways of doing things. So we had to, or the people that were adapting had to have some form of open-mindedness. And there's a listening component that comes out a lot, and it's reactive. Something has changed, and I'm reacting to that change, instead of thinking, okay, something's changed. Well, I'm going to just go out and do something new or create something new. So hopefully that helps in terms of skill sets. Technology. So there was a pretty ambitious goal at the beginning, that was tied to the project deliverables, which was we would inventory all of the technology that was used in these efforts. That turned out to be I won't say a non-starter, but it didn't seem as pertinent as we went along to try to list out all the different microphones, the um, whatever visual or audio cards, the Zoom platform, which level of Zoom, and all these different itemized technological pieces. And it was Anton, who was working with Kathleen and Kate for a while at CCNC, who came up with this sentence that really captures a lot of it, which is technology is simply a tool in the service of an organization's leadership. We can have all the great technological stuff we could dream of, but if there isn't somebody there who's got an idea to do something good with it, it's not going to go anywhere. So we decided to not try to list out every single piece of hardware, because that would just have been futile. And somebody doing something one day with this set of equipment may not actually work as well for the next person who's got a bit of a different setup or scenario. So technology, wonderful stuff, but you still need somebody to operate it and have some ideas on how to operate it. So if we come to the end of this section here, before we go off on a break, um, just some high level conclusions. Key resources and key partners were generally important considerations when developing any of these approaches, but really good ideas have to be rooted in some form of realistic achievement. So we still have to think about key activities. What can we actually do that will be that physical or well, that representation of our value proposition? Cost structure and revenue streams were always a concern, and government funding support programs were great, but they don't make that great a story. Yeah, we accessed CERB. Okay, it's a bit of a non-starter, and we were much more interested in decisions that people made within their organization. Yes, CERB, SEBA, all those government programs were an incredible boon and helped us, but we didn't want to simply say, okay, well, next problem that comes around, well, hopefully the government will throw money at us. We want to be resilient. We need to make decisions. We need to think about how we're going to do things, whether it's adaptation, doing different things, or doing things differently to provide a reduced cost structure or a better revenue stream. Being aware of your value proposition is always a really good idea, and in many cases, it was a source of inspiration. People had forgotten what their actual mission was or their objectives, and went back to it and said, "Well, you know what? We can do this." And thinking about their customer segments, which were sometimes a little more local, realized they'd neglected the more local component and were going outwards. So then realized, you know what? We can do things locally right now. So that was a source of inspiration. And you also want to be very mindful or careful of mission drift in a nonprofit or charitable organization. So you can avoid that obviously by thinking about your customer segments, your customer relationships, and the channels through which that are all connected to your value proposition delivery for the right side of your business model canvas. And when we're thinking about stories like the Dalton Trail Gallery, that's not a typo, they're a really good demonstration of a rapid turnaround because there was one person making decisions and she could just go ahead. She didn't need to check with a whole bunch of people. So that's really great. But it's very useful to have a larger team, more heads together to think about long-term changes or, rarely in a nonprofit or charitable organization can we really have one person just I'm making all the decisions, I'm going to lead the charge and I'm going to go ahead. And that's that. So those are all elements that are tied to these different stories and resilience efforts. And hopefully all of that information will help you for the next segment, which is we will be looking at the actual frameworks and writing stuff out. And if ever you are around a table one day where you've got a problem, hopefully the stages of a crisis and identifying the different elements of a crisis will help you circumscribe the problem to the single problem where it resides in your, let's say, business model canvas. And, you know, the people that are around the table, do you have the right leadership style? Do you have the right leadership type? And what resources do you have that you can leverage towards achieving anything that you want to adapt or innovate? Okay, that was a lot of words in. We made it in just over 60 minutes after introductions, Kathleen.
That's amazing, Greg. That's awesome. And I feel as though it's just so much information. And I'm sure that everybody's just kind of like, oh, okay, great. What are we going to do with this? I note that Kate has put the business model canvas in the chat. So that is what we're going to use when we go into the next section. So I think, Greg, we're going to take a short break, right? And we will come back at 1:20 Eastern time. That'll be 10:20 Pacific time. And anybody who's in between, hopefully you can figure that out. Please remain muted, and you can certainly turn off your video if you feel to. We are live on YouTube, and we're going to just let this be for the 10 minutes that we go away and take our break. And when we come back, we'll start to work on some of these in more practical and in group sense. Greg?
Awesome. See you all in 10 minutes. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, hello, and I guess welcome back.
Hi, Greg. How are you doing?
I almost got stuck in traffic on the way back.
Did you change over your laundry?
Actually, no, forgot to do that.
Oh,
Next break.
right. All right. Well, good. So here we are back at 1:20 Eastern and 10:20 Pacific. And thanks everybody who's joining us today. We are doing a wonderful presentation here. I don't know if we might want to just send out a reminder, Kate, to people like they can join now, even though they missed the beginning and they could go back. But in any case, we are here together, and it's really exciting to have all of you here. I did notice that uh, a couple of people have said, that, like, for example, we had what there's a woman from Sean, no, not Sean. Anyway, there was somebody who's joined the call who was from a local municipality, and I know we have a number of people who were interested in taking this program from various municipalities, and hopefully you'll be able to pass all of this wonderful information on to your arts and culture organizations and artists in your communities that might, have very good use of this information. So thanks again, and it was a great presentation in the first half. Thanks, Greg. And let's move on to the second half.
Excellent. So thanks, and yeah. So I did see a comment. Somebody said, "Oh, I got to take this back to my committee." I think we've had that comment every time we've delivered one of these presentations where somebody says, I got to go back to my board with this, and we need to use these. So hopefully we'll get that same reaction for all of the frameworks that we're going to discuss. We are screen sharing. Yes. Okay. So part two, applying these actual frameworks and organizational diagnosis. So we started with the business model canvas right before the break, and this is where I propose that we pick up again. And so we're going to move people to breakout rooms that which have been assigned by I don't know if it was randomly or by Kathleen or Kate. One group will be staying here just for the benefit of the live audience on YouTube, so that they can see the process happening. But basically, everybody's received the business model canvas, and in your individual rooms, if you want to elect which organization you'd like to base the work on, or if everybody wants to do it individually, we could just troubleshoot and chat. But at the very basic level, we want you to grab the actual handout and to start filling it in with an organization. So we've created a Word document that you can use. Some of you might have tablets with stylus. You can use the PDF model, whatever works for you in the room. If we can just figure out rapidly in each individual room if you're taking one organization or another, and basically fill out the business model canvas. Can you identify your value proposition? What is your mission and your objectives? Who your customer segments are? Who are the people that are paying for the organization to keep the lights on? How is your value proposition delivered to your customer segments? So what are your channels? In some cases, it can be as basic as, well, we have a theater building and we operate a theater, and people come to our theater to be able to access the theater productions. Your customer relationships, that one can be a little thinner. Maybe you don't want to belabor that one, but how close are you with your customers? Do you have an organization barbecue every year where you thank the sponsors, funders, and your clients, your members, or is it just like a quick email campaign? Thanks, folks. Hope you renew. And how do you capture that revenue, or what are your different revenue streams? So you actually park those on the business model canvas. And on the left side of it, who are your key partners, the folks that you absolutely need to be able to produce that value proposition? What are the key activities that are performed on key resources that make that value proposition a living thing? Key resources can include, most likely, it used to be 4M and I. So it used to be men, machines, money, material, and information. But we're in 2023, so we'll evacuate the men part and we'll put people, material, machines, money, and information. So the PIM would be the one way of seeing it. So what are your key resources? And time can be a key resource as well. If you're a musician, you may need time to practice to bring that repertoire up. A composer will need time to write their scores. writers will need time to do that. So what are your key resources? What are the key activities, and how they bring your value proposition to life? And that's all tied to your cost structure. Now, we're not going to have time to go back and visit your financial statements, your full ledgers and all that. So just maybe summarize anything that has to do with cost structure or revenue streams. If you're paying for something from your partners, then maybe just ballpark it. A key resource, how much is staffing? How much is uh, other raw materials that you absolutely need? So if you're comfortable with that, and I will circulate in all the rooms except the main room here, where Kathleen's going to be leading that discussion in this room. And so we'll do the business model canvas first. We'll take, I'll say 15 minutes, just I went a little long on the explanation here. So 15 minutes to populate your business model canvas, and we'll come back to the main room here. And then after that, we'll look at another framework that will help us get more insight into our organizations.
So Kate is going to put up the rooms to join. And if you get an invitation for room 1, don't join. Just stay in the room with me. You'll be in the room with me. Okay. Otherwise, if you get an invitation for 2 or 3 or 4, then choose to go into those rooms and you'll get to work with your partners a little bit. And Greg will visit you in room 2, 3, or 4 shortly through the process. Okay, Kate, has everybody joined now?
I believe so. I think we can get going.
Terrific. Okay, so we have Wendy from Arts Etobicoke. Hi, Wendy. And Colin from Steps Public Art. And Jesse, what's your affiliation, Jesse?
Saanich Parks and Recreation.
Oh, great. Awesome. Welcome. And Lyle, what's your affiliation, Lyle? Hi, Lyle. You unmuted there for a moment and then muted again. There you are. I guess we can't actually hear you, Lyle. So if you have stuff that you want to say, oh, maybe can I hear you now?
Hello.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Sorry, I changed my phone. I'm in Powell River, BC, Park Trade and Culture.
Oh, terrific. Yeah, great to have you here. Okay, good. Well, we have 2 municipal, and then we have Arts Etobicoke and Steps Public Art. Steps Public Art, by the way, is one of the organizations that was featured in our phase 1 research. So they're going to do a little presentation at the end of this whole sort of thing. And so I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to share my screen, and I think maybe I'll just figure out exactly where we are here. Yep, business model canvas. My screen share is loading. All right then. Okay, can you see that? I don't see it. Okay, well, that's odd that I don't see it. Isn't that weird? Okay, I will just open it up myself here. There we go. Okay, so when I type in here, you can see when I say hi. Perfect. Okay, thanks, Jesse. That's awesome. All right, so why don't we, Colin, why don't we do steps here, like in this particular business model canvas? Why don't we just take a stab at like putting these kinds of things together? Do you want to, let's start with the value proposition.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just kind of joined this workshop thing last minute and still trying to remember.
Okay, so the value proposition is like your mission, right? So, and so what we're going to do here is going to kind of fill this thing out, which is going to include your mission and then your key partners, etc. Right? So steps mission.
Yeah, to create equitable communities through placemaking, cultural planning, and community-based public art.
I'm just gonna, and public art, just gonna fill that in. So that's the value proposition. essentially for STEP's public art. And so like, do you want to choose one of these things to kind of fill in, like who might be your key partners or maybe your key activities?
Key activities, I guess, would be like placemaking, artist capacity building programs, cultural planning. Yeah, so it's almost like bringing some of that, the propositions into like the activities as well.
And so let's continue here. This is great because actually it's kind of helping us really fill this in. So who are your key partners when you're doing this? I know CCNC has got to be one of them.
Right at the top.
Well, I'm going to put that down. I mean, especially our summit, right? So
yeah, key partners would be various municipalities across the country, BIAs, or I guess BRZs, so different in every province, of course, but the business improvement associations. And we have an agency side as well. So we also have a lot of developers we work with, as well as other corporate partners and clients. And artists as well would be another huge key partner.
okay, so let's like flip this over and say, who are your like customers, I guess, right? So you've got customer segments, like there's certain people who are buying your product, right? So some of those are the same as the key partners. And maybe the way that Greg is, maybe the way that Greg is defining key partners are the people that or the organizations or people that you need in order to make your business happen. But your customers might, so CCNC might be a key partner, but a municipality might be a customer.
Yeah, true. And I'm thinking about, other key partners would be maybe our funders as well. Just thinking about, Canada Council for the Arts, Ontario Arts Council as like, I guess in that term, thinking about it like that as partners. So the various funders. But yeah, the customer segments would definitely be municipalities, BIAs, artists in particular, and designers. Maybe going back to partners, just thinking about different fabricators we work with and suppliers to help produce the artwork.
Yeah, see, this is great. This is sort of populating all of this stuff. And maybe some of it needs to be sort of slightly adjusted. I don't know if we'll get Greg in the room who will help us do that a bit, but we'll see if he joins us soon. And then customer relationships. Well, let's talk about maybe key resources. Like if we're going to say, what are the key resources that you need in order to do this? It sounds like suppliers and fabricators might actually be part of this here.
Yes, not only as a partner, but as a definite resource. We couldn't do that without them. And again, I think I would put artists and designers we work back into that category as well.
Right, good. Well, we're really getting this populated. Customer relationships, like what would you say, how do you keep in touch with all of these people, and what kind of relationships, like you might have email, or you might have newsletters, or you might have, like, how are you keeping in touch with your customers? Well,
we definitely have like a monthly newsletter we put out. We have an active social media channels that we utilize. Lots of emails and outreach too. We definitely like to keep in touch with the different customers and people and partners we work with. Set up like meetings to like just check in, see where there's opportunities. Like lots of debriefings as well to help identify future opportunities.
And I guess in some ways, like STEPS has been part of the Creative City Summit many times. So like attending.
We have conferences, like say workshops and things like this too, right? That was the first thing I thought of, right?
Okay. Okay, so, and channels. Now, I'm not sure if I kind of actually understood the channels thing, and I'm not sure I can go back on Greg's thing readily and easily, but actually, well, no, it would take a while for me to do that. But the channels are like, I mean, it sounds like social media and email and conferences and workshops are similar channels that you might have, right?
Definitely, yeah. Attending, and also I would think like, you know, open houses, if there's any sort of like information fairs or public facing events that we can kind of pop into.
Mhm. Okay. So really, like, I mean, you can see how maybe Wendy and also Jesse and Lyle, who are coming from the municipal, you can see how maybe populating this will help you understand what, you know, the key partners are and what your customers are and how that relates back to your value proposition. And then cost structure, like we're not asking you for exactly how much it costs you to do this, but the kind of like expenses that you might have here. Did you, maybe I should just, before I go on any further, did you, Jesse or Lyle or Wendy, have any comments or questions before we move on to the other parts of this?
I guess I'm wondering about the difference between, and maybe you're running to difference between like channels and customer relationships. Like I wondered if under customer relationships, if that's where I would put like program participants, like the actual people in our programs,
I think maybe that comes under customer segments.
oh,
Like, so
right.
the list of different sort of different groups that you're creating your product for, kind of thing. Yeah. And I could go back, but I feel like I don't want to take the time to do that. So hi, Kate. There's Kate with us. Colin, do you want to talk a little bit about cost structure? Like, I mean, you obviously have, you know, staff and, you know, various kinds of things. So staff, we'll put that down.
Yes, I would say staff, I guess space, like office space.
Here's Greg, so we can actually ask him our question. Are you there, Greg?
Yep.
Yeah, we have a quick question. We were wondering about the customer relationships, channels, and customer segments, so whether or not we kind of got this right. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Channels, workshops, open houses, fairs, public facing events. Okay, so I see. Yeah, so I would say that, and again, it's not. I don't dictate what's right, what's wrong. I would think that newsletters might be part of the customer relationships. They could also be part of your channels if they're actually the way that you get people to engage with your content, your goods and services. But they can also be part of your customer relationships because maybe that's where you're communicating a lot of stuff. You're providing information and making sure that you are engaged with your clientele. So some of these items might show up in two different places because they serve two different functions. Social media could very well be part of your customer relationships. If you're an ongoing, you know, you've got somebody who's behind the social media, Facebook and all that, and they're constantly interacting. So anybody has a question, they get an answer within an hour. If we take police services, they used to be very disconnected with the population, but now they all have a Twitter account and they've got somebody monitoring it and sending out messages. So it's much more close, heartfelt, in real-time relationship. It isn't necessarily part of their value proposition or their channels of delivery in terms of services to the population, but it definitely is part of that interaction with folks.
Thanks, Greg. You know
Um,
what? I got to say that we apparently have people in room 3 are struggling a little bit. So we'd like to send you over there because I think we're pretty far along the path here. So I think that we have a pretty good idea of what we're trying to do with this, and we can talk more about it when we come back into the main room. There he goes. All right. So I think we kind of got that question answered. So that's great. Office space, but you must have other kinds of cost things, Colin, that you.
Oh, definitely. I have to think like insurances, production costs, like when thinking
Right.
about, you know, if we're working, you know, with a large scale mural, there's the production cost for the fabricators. I would also say a lot of advisory networks that we hire and employ. You working a lot with equity deserving communities. We're ensuring we're working with a variety of different networks from relevant communities to ensure we're making those informed decisions.
Okay, great. And revenue streams, I mean, obviously municipal, oops, didn't spell that right. Municipalities are one of the main revenue streams probably for you, right?
When we work, with BIAs and municipalities that hire us to do cultural planning services and different programs, I would also say our revenue stream comes from our agency side. So I'd say like the corporate clients we have and developers we work with. Also, being a registered nonprofit, we're able to lean into federal grants through Canada Council for the Arts, Ontario Arts Council. And I think definitely through also, to really lean into some of the community grants we can get from other corporate sponsors, like some banks, I would say too.
Like a foundation kind of stuff. Foundations and maybe corporate sponsorship.
Yep. You've done this before, I can see.
Yeah, it's not my first kick of the can. 30, 40 years in the business over here for sure.
Lots of partnerships too that help bring in the revenue stream too. I would say lean into those.
Yeah. Okay, so
share kind of revenue costs too for different projects.
Right. Okay. So I wanted to ask Arts Etobicoke, right? Like, how does this sort of sit with you? Like, what's your response to this?
Yeah, I've been going through it just on my own as Colin's been talking, and we're a community arts organization, and it's been very similar to Steps' experience here. So very easy to follow along with and add in my own, how it relates to Arts Etobicoke. So looks quite good.
Okay, and so over to you, Jessie Zanich. So do you feel as though, so just to let you know, this whole presentation plus all the associated materials is going to be packaged up, and there's going to be a website, like a web page on our website and on Greg's, and also on Les Arts à la Ville, but en français, for anybody to make use of. So do you feel as though this will be something that you can pass on to your community?
To my coworkers.
What I mean is the people that are taking part, like for example, Saanich will have a number of organizations that you support and fund to do programs in your community, right? Not just arts and culture either, but even your recreation ones, right? When they're doing their planning for their organization, this is a tool that, or an entire set of tools that they might use.
Yeah, we don't really fund other organizations. Like I work in a recreation center where we, I organize like registered programs. And then there's a community services department that, sometimes we work with community service organizations that get grants that help to cover the cost of the program. But I don't think I'd be supporting other like nonprofit organizations, or that's just not in my capacity.
Right. Yeah.
We're kind of like,
okay.
Just staying within our own municipality, but it'd be useful for
sure.
my coworkers. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks, Jessie. What about you, Lyle, in Powell River?
I can't hear
you,
Lyle.
even though you're not muted, but we can't really hear you.
How about now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Yeah, so not similar to Jessie, I'm not in a role here where I really have the capacity, but we in my department we do support some nonprofit or arts organizations, and in 2 weeks I'm actually moving to one of them. So this is really relevant for me, but I'm brand new, first kick at the can. I'll be moving to Cathalmu. It's a choral festival.
I totally know about Cathalmu. I used
Perfect.
to I
Yeah.
used to run the Nanaimo Conservatory of Music, and I was the president of the BC Community Music Schools Association. Yeah, wonderful,
Perfect.
wonderful program, huge
Great. Yeah.
program.
So
I don't know if you haven't heard of it. Like Cathalomew is the place to go if you're a singer. It is totally the place to go. Yeah.
yeah. So starting in April, I'll be heading over there.
Well, this will be great, useful for Cathalomew. I mean,
Yes.
Cathalomew has a great reputation. They kind of do know this, but to take this sort of business model canvas and sort of break down, you know, what is our value, and then what are we doing, and who are we doing it for, and how much does it cost, and how much are we getting in? Like that's a great way to break it down. We're going to look at some other models. I think we're going to be coming back into the main room shortly. But does anybody have any other comments or questions or?
Wait, how do you use this tool? What are the next steps? So we've got this kind of filled in. I'm not totally clear on how to analyze this.
Yeah, I think the idea here is that if you know this information, like if you've done this analysis, then and you come up against some kind of problem or issue, that then you have better tools to figure out where in your business model canvas you're going to make change.
Okay.
Are you going to bring in new key partners? Are you going to, you know, bring in new customers? Are you going to deliver different kinds of activities? Right. So it's kind of like, and then you test these things. And the other models that we're going to look at in Greg's presentation are going to help us sort of more refine and define that sort of like analysis process as well. But that's how this is used, I believe, is like, if we're going to make change, or how are we doing? Like if we're not achieving any of these things that we've identified here, how are we going to make that change so that we can actually, you know, connect with artists? Maybe we say we're going to connect with artists and we never do, you know, kind of thing, right? So, you know, I think it's a really good, I personally feel like in the next planning stage that CCNC goes through, we'll definitely be using these tools, because this is helpful to identify those areas. And how do you market to them? What are you going to, you know, is there any other kinds of offerings you're going to give them? You know, that kind of thing.
Great. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, I'm going to stop sharing now, if that's okay with you. Certainly, Colin, I can share this with you afterwards so that you've got it and you can adjust it how you will. And we'll just wait for the rest of the room to come back, because we are still the ones in the main room here. Hi, Kate, we're just saying that we're ready to come back whenever you are. Looks
We've
like
got a
we're good.
countdown here.
Yep, we're counting down. Okay. Once we get back into the room, Greg, Wendy had a question about, you know, how to use a business model canvas, and I thought that was a good question.
Sure, I can answer it now or wait for everybody to come back.
I think we should wait until we've got, you know, the room filled back up again.
So hi, Wendy. I haven't seen you since school.
Hi, Colin. Colin and I went to University of Manitoba together.
Oh, no kidding.
Maybe not quite 20 years ago, but I haven't seen you since then.
Wow, 20 years ago, I was in Manitoba too.
No kidding.
Yes, I was running the Winnipeg International Writers Festival.
Oh, amazing.
And you're out in Alberta now.
No,
Colin.
I'm on the West Coast. Oh, sorry, Colin. Colin.
Yeah, I moved to Alberta about a year ago. So yeah.
Great. Yeah. Nice to see you.
Yes, I'll send you an email after. I'll find you.
Yeah, sounds great.
So we had a question, Kathleen, that you wanted me to answer with the rest of the group around.
Yeah.
Do you want to just repeat that question?
Well, I'll leave it up to Wendy to ask the question.
Sure. Yeah, I filled it all out. So my question was really kind of, how do I use it? What are the next steps, or how do I kind of analyze this information now that I have it in front of me?
Right. So the first step is a little static, because we're just parking information about an organization, and it's tied to, I'll say, organizational diagnosis, just to be clear and cognizant of the organization. There are different times that this can come in handy if you're starting up a new organization or you're starting up a new line of business. And I also see not-for-profits as there's still a business part to it because we're trying to, get money in and pay for certain stuff. So there is a business aspect. If I wanted to, even just at a small scale, I want to play some music and make money with it. Okay, well, my value proposition is I'm going to deliver high quality guitar recitals. If I just sum it up very rapidly, my customer segments would be, I can identify them as people that have, some disposable income. So potentially anybody who's between 20 and 100 that has interest in classical guitar. My channels, I may be renting out, so the concert spaces would be, let's say, churches in which I will perform, or I can do some online stuff for different folks. My customer relationships, seeing as it's I'll say it's a niche market, I really have to nurture that clientele to make sure that that they stay engaged and that I get feedback from them and I can adapt the concerts to what they would prefer so that I can grow that audience base as well. That would be tied to my revenue structure, my revenue streams. So I will be able to capture that revenue by ticket prices at the door, potentially Arts Canada Council for the Arts if I'm developing new creations, compositions, or other things, or if I'm exploring, I might be able to get some grants there. So those could still be. And then so I've just found a new customer segment because the granting bodies might pay for some of the work I do. So that's all part of my kind of my startup. And then what do I absolutely need to do to be able to produce these concerts? One of the key resources is the actual skills involved with reading music, learning texts, playing the actual guitar. Because if I said, I'm going to start singing, well, I don't have the resource to actually sing because I'm not a very good singer, but I do have the physical resource, which is a guitar. I've got the competency to play the guitar. I also have a high level of virtuosity. Key activities. I'm going to actually need to learn and practice the repertoire and leading up to the actual concert, the deliverable, which is the key activity that allows me to share that music with the customer segments that are going to be paying during these concerts at the door so I can capture that revenue. Now that's tied to the cost structure, which is so I need to say, okay, so if I want to produce a recital, it's going to basically take me a month from zero to actually getting up on stage. Now I'm going to have to feed myself. I'm going to have to make sure that I keep the lights on, whatnot, pay for kids' activities and all that. So let's say it's going to cost me $5,000 for the month. I need to make sure that that concert that I'm putting on is going to bring in $5,000 because the key activities that are tied to actually making that deliverable a reality will require a month's worth of practicing. I will also need, in terms of key activities, to have email campaigns or interactions with potential clients, patrons that will come in and pay for that. And I will need some key partners because I don't own a concert hall. So I'm going to have to rent a concert hall. If I lose that concert hall, or if I don't have the online streaming platform, Patreon or whatever I want to use, then I won't be able to get that content out there, which is part of my value proposition and my key activity, which is the deliverable, which will monetize from the client, the customer segments. So you can use it as a startup tool to figure out all the missing pieces you need to actually deliver and thrive, or at least break even in many cases. Or you can sit down and say, okay, my organization today has a static, snapshot. What most of you probably have done right now is look at it and what does my organization look like? What are these different boxes and can I fill them out? Because if you can't fill one of the boxes out, apart from customer relationships, if you can't fill out a box, you're missing a vital piece of information on how you actually operate to deliver something. Maybe you don't have partners. I think most people have some form of partnership with someone. Your key resources, you probably have personnel, staff that are involved with the operations to be able to create, deliver whatever cultural goods or services you have. So I can take it from there. And then, so the pandemic hits. So if I go back to my guitar player scenario here, I can't do live concerts anymore, but I've still got my gated Patreon or online platform in which I can deliver content. So one of my channels got lost and I can't get that channel back. So maybe, but I can keep operating and maybe I can develop new lines of online stuff. So I will use the same key resources, playing, learning music, delivering concerts. But you know what? I think I'm going to try something new. Instead of having a broad audience, I'm going to do one-on-one concerts. Invite me into your house for Sunday brunch with you and your family. So I'm going to change one of the elements of maybe my key activities or possibly value proposition, which is instead of having concerts that are open to the public, I will have one-on-one events and you get to choose the music. Oh, so that's going to change my customer relationships because I'm going to be asking folks, what songs would you like to hear during your Sunday brunch next week? And instead of charging you $25 to listen to me play for an hour, you're deciding on all the material. So I'm going to charge you $500 or $200, or maybe I'll just sit down and improvise for you. So I might be changing some of the content, might be changing some of the activities, some of the resources. I'll be focusing on one of my two channels, and I'll be creating a stronger or more intimate customer relationship for one of my lines of business. So you see, so it's really just parking things so that it isn't, because we oftentimes we just go off on a whole bunch of different tangents and try to figure things out, everything at the same time. When, okay, so I've got this one idea. What is it going to affect in my other boxes, or what do I need to make that a reality? And if maybe you realize all of our customer segments, sorry, a bit of a grim scenario, but everybody that was part of our customer segments no longer exists. That demographic simply does not exist. We don't have any customers anymore. So if the customers don't exist anymore, maybe we need to change our value proposition to find new customer segments. But we can see the interaction between the boxes, but there's always kind of a root cause or a source, and it will impact other things. So that might have been a bit of a circuitous route, but there are many ways in which you can use the business model canvas to fix problems or think about new things you want to do. In some cases, you may, and part of the next segment when we're looking at resources specifically, you might start listing out a lot of resources you have and then realize, okay, well, this one thing that we were doing, a key activity, we can't do that anymore. But then we realize, hey, we've got a resource. Think of the Dalton Trail Gallery. I've got a physical resource. I can use my own space to exhibit artwork instead of using a gallery. So I lost a key partner and I've lost a key channel, but really I've got this other resource that can give me a new channel that I don't need that partner for anymore.
Mhm.
Is
Awesome.
that
I think
sufficient?
that was helpful. Hey, Wendy. Okay, great.
Yeah, so it's kind of like if you're looking at the blueprint for your house. Okay, this part's not working. I want to change. I want to renovate. You really don't want to knock that wall down, because if you do, then something else is going to collapse. So it can give you a sense, and it's really just laying out the kind of groundwork for your organization. And so this leads actually so your question leads brilliantly into the next segment. Do you see my business model canvas again? My screen sharing? Okay. So the next one that I'd like us to look at, and sorry, we're going a little longer, but it's at least we're interactive now. You're not stuck listening to me for another hour. The profiting model is a really efficient way to tease out a lot of those PIM elements: personnel, information, money, materials, and machines. But by bucketing things. Now, it isn't so important that you put it in the right bucket or right line, but the important thing is that you actually list the resources you have. So your organization, what physical resources does it have? Do you have an office space? For individual artists, do you have a studio in which you can create your artistic products? If you're a painter, then do you have a place to paint? Or are you, standing outside under the rain trying to paint something? Do you have physical resources you can use? Reputational, we forget how important that is. But if you have a track record of always delivering, think about, all those bands out there. If I said Coldplay's rolling into town, you'd be like, oh, I really love what they do. They're coming out with a new album. You haven't heard the album yet, but because you like the band, they have a reputation, you will want to go see their show. Oh, that's a great show. I'm going to go see it. Jeff Bezos walks into a bank and says, I want a $50,000 loan. Sure, we know he's good for it just by his reputation. If I walk into the same bank and say, I want a $50,000 loan, they'll say, who are you? Every one of our funders, when we're applying for funding in whatever form, will ask, what's your track record of success? Do you have testimonials of people saying what this organization does or what this person does is phenomenal? So what's your reputation? It is a resource. We're going to skip organizational. Financial. Do you have access to lines of credit? Do you have money set aside? Do you have banknotes, bonds, or anything that would help you financially if you needed them? It's good to list them out. Intellectual. What are the skill sets and competencies that you have that are part of your human resources or yourself, your board? What can you list those out? Maybe you have a really good artistic production, but you have horrible financial management skills. So another way that you can use this is you list all of the stuff you have, but you also create a separate list of all the stuff you don't have that you really need. And typically, the stuff you don't have but you really need will show up in your partner base. So your partners bring physical, reputational, organizational, financial, intellectual, technological, and informational resources that you don't own or have. So any assets you have or resources you have access to, then I would list them in your resources. Also list the ones you don't have. Technological. I want to start selling videos of me playing classical guitar. Great. I don't own a really good camera. I don't have a really good mic. I don't have a sound card in my computer, and my editing skills are not worth mentioning. I'm missing technological things. But if I've got a great sound card, I've got a great video camera, I've got a great mic, I've got a great lighting system, these are all technological things that I can list that are part of production that I want to do. And if I've listed them out, and maybe currently I'm not doing anything online for classical guitar concerts, but I've got all the equipment, so I could do that if I decided to. Informational. Do you have networks that can bring you the information, the inside track? Do you have studies, surveys, business cases, or anything like that will provide you the information you need to be able to operate better, more efficiently, more effectively, or to see things coming before they actually happen? Go back to organizational. Another one that we think about, are you actually organized is the first question. Are you organized to actually do things? Does your organization, if you're working in let's say, a municipal environment, there's a fair chance that you've got a rake diagram that explains the lines of reporting and actions, processes, operations that are tied to your production. Are they understood? Are they organized? And this can also just be a catch-all for anything you think that you've got as a resource you can lean on. Well, that's just part of my organizational resources. Now, should you list a computer as a physical item or a technological item? Completely up to you. Do you have software that you can use that helps you produce or helps your organization thrive, cuts down on admin time so that you could produce more? Is that intellectual, informational, or technological? Completely up to you. But all of these, is it seven? 7 lines provide lines of thought into the things that you possess in your organization. Shall we?
All right, that sounds great. Maybe we should go into our groups again and try filling this one in.
So yeah, I can navigate around if people need some help with this.
What we're going to do this time is we're going to only have 2 groups. So if you have an invitation for group 2, then please go and join that group. And if you have an invitation for group 1, please just stay in this room.
Just 5 minutes this time.
5 minutes on the property model.
Yeah, brainstorm. Throw anything you can on the page.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. All right. So now I'm going to share my screen. I've got the property model up here. And who do I have in the room now? Oh, hi, Leslie. How are you doing? Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Kathleen.
Yeah. Okay. So in our last room, we made use of the STEPS public art folks to look at the business model canvas. So I'm just there's a couple of people in this room that have not been introduced. So I'm just going to ask Gary to let us know. Gary, where are you from and who are you representing?
Yeah, I'm from Northern Ontario, city of Greater Sudbury, or just outside of it. And I'm with an organization called Cafe Heritage Productions. We're a nonprofit organization that basically produces heritage theme events in Northeastern Ontario. So
Okay.
that's concerts, festivals, and both virtual and live productions.
Okay, sounds good. Leslie, do you want to do a quick introduction to yourself?
Not really, but I think I know Gary.
Okay, well, all right
Um,
then. I
Yeah,
just said we only have 5 minutes, so we're going to really rip through this.
yeah,
So,
I'm an arts consultant who lives in Vancouver.
and she's awesome. Barrie Indian Association. Okay, it's okay if you don't want to talk. Lyle is from Powell River, and he's with the Parks Recreation area, and Jessie is from Saanich, and she's with Recreation there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Gary to be our guinea pig this time, and we're going to go through this property model and kind of try and figure out, you know, what Gary's organization has in terms of resources that might make him successful, or things that maybe he might find that he needs. So again, the name of your organization, Gary?
It's Cafe Heritage Productions.
Oh, productions, there we go. Okay, so do you have physical resources? Like, do you have an office space and stuff, Gary?
No, we don't. We basically don't have any bricks and mortar. We use approximately 10 or 15 different venues for all of our events. So we don't even have any full-time staff. Our budget's $225,000, and I'm the executive director, and I work full-time as a volunteer for the organization.
Okay, wow, great, awesome.
We have a
Wow.
board of directors of 9. We have 12 to 15 volunteer managers, and we have over 100 volunteers.
I think we put that stuff in this organizational area. One volunteer ED. And did you say 100 volunteers?
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, those are also, I think, yeah, that can be organizational. And how's your reputation? Do you have great reputation in your community for doing all these things?
Well, always working on improving. But for example, we had one of our sponsors approach us basically to see what we could do to help them promote their business, and we're looking at developing a park program with a stage, etc. So basically, they reached out to us to work with them to bring their corporation to one of our local parks.
Right. So they're going to kind of like do a naming thing for the park and then support. Right.
That could be part of the recognition, yes, for the sponsor, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think we're always trying to improve on the reputation. There's like we have our traditional Canadian heritage sponsors that come back every year, so that's sort of indicative that we're doing something right in those areas. Also with the Northern Ontario Heritage Foundation, one of our continued sponsors, and our municipality as well continues to invest into our productions. So I think
it sounds like your reputation is pretty good, actually.
Well, it can always improve, I guess.
Right. And do you have a lot of people who attend your events?
Well, basically, I'll just give you an example. We do our summer concerts. So we do at the park every Thursday night. It's a summer concert series. And so we probably a low of 250 and a high of 600 that would attend. And our population is like around 4,000. So in our neighborhood. So we're fairly successful when it comes to reaching out to these people.
Your population is what again?
Well, the city's population is 153,000, but our neighborhood is roughly 20,000 that we try to service.
I'll put a neighborhood population.
Yeah.
Okay. Financial resources, like you don't have to disclose all of your stuff, but you said you have a budget of 225,000.
It's about 225, and sponsorships is approximately 50,000. Basically grants would be close to 50,000, and the rest would be an earned revenue from ticket sales, gaming revenue, meals and bars revenues as well. So that would pick up the balance.
And you have all the stuff that you need in place in terms of those financial pieces, like, you know, the right banking, the right, you know, like,
Yeah,
do you have any?
Yeah, we're there solid. We try and work on a, you know, basically a 6-month investment plan where we have resources to be able to manage for at least 6 months.
Awesome. That's
So we
great.
have
That's really actually very stabilizing.
Yeah, we are stabilized.
Yeah. Okay, let's
Almost-
move on to, okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Now we're good.
Yeah. So in terms of intellectual resources, do you feel as though you have the intellectual resources, whether through yourself, your board members, your partners, you know, in order to do a good job to make this happen?
Well, I think we're developing that because basically when 2020 hit, we were there without basically, you know, all of our live productions. So we created a company called Upfront Productions, which is a virtual production company. So we were able to pull together webcasters, videographers. We developed, you know, the ability to go virtual. So it's really been an asset for us because we didn't get hurt that hard by COVID because we didn't have the bricks and mortar. We don't have any full-time staff. So we're very, very agile. And so what we did is we basically created all of our festivals in virtual formats. And this is a godsend for us right now because when we do grant applications, we can do both. So our reach, our local audience, for example, at one of our concerts might be 500 or 600 people, but the reach might be 2,000 or 3,000 with the virtual production. So that's giving us a lot more reach, and our sponsors and our funders, of course, enjoy that kind of publicity, you know, that we're getting. So we're able to, we're still on a learning curve where we do the live streaming, we do the, you know, we do the other different kinds of broadcasting and stuff like that, YouTubes and what. So like right now we have over 50, I think it's 51-hour productions that we can go into long-term care homes and they can put on their smart TVs and they can watch
That's super
productions.
duper.
Yeah.
That's awesome. We've got only a few seconds, so I'm going to try and get through the rest of these. So technological, it sounded like you needed some technological resources to get this done.
We've actually created a portable studio. So now we have a portable studio. We've got approximately $8,000 or $9,000 worth of camera equipment, video equipment, switchers and stuff like that. So we can go into and doing memory mapping, for example. We do memory mapping with some of our senior citizens to collect their stories and whatever have you. So we're capable of them coming to us or we go to them. We work with the UN NATO Canada to do Remembrance Day live streaming. So we have all this equipment to be able to go out and do that kind of work as well. So, and we're developing there.
All right. Okay. I'm going to leave the informational side because it looks like we're all back in the room. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We've had a really interesting time talking with Gary Michalak from Cafe Heritage Productions in Northern Ontario. And we went through his information for the property model. So I'll just stop sharing and pass it back to Greg.
Actually, you can leave that up there if you want.
Oh,
I think
all
that's a
right,
really
thanks.
nice, really nicely captured. And what I was saying in the other room while we were in the other room is that one of the fun things about these frameworks and models is that you don't have to necessarily get it all done today, and you put out whatever you can brainstorm today, put it aside, leave it as like a corporate file somewhere, and then every time something happens, you can just go back to it and either edit it, you know, update it. And it becomes a living tool. I really like to keep these evergreen for CHRC and the other nonprofits that I work in. And seeing as you left informational out, I'll just grab onto that one for a second. Sometimes we forget that internally, information circulation, so this could be tied to organizational. Do you have you know, phone call trees? If there's something that happens and needs to be addressed, do you have a way to distribute or disperse information rapidly within the groups that need to have the information to be able to make decisions or to execute plans that have been made? So that's, you know, that none of these I think we can necessarily neglect. And I think it was Leslie who asked in the other room, you know, or mentioned in the other room, was more interested in what we don't have So it's really good to list what you have, but it's also awesome to list what you don't have to be able to see where your kind of weaknesses are. And we most likely have all heard about the SWOT analysis: strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And most SWOT that I've seen, if somebody hasn't done a proper pestle analysis and a proper profit analysis, the SWOT analysis is typically a little weak. These really just bring out details in a way that we hadn't necessarily thought of ahead of time. So it just helps to bring some information forward. This is a really good list, by the way. Looks a lot of typing.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing now.
Yeah, so we did have a scheduled break a few minutes ago that we just kind of rode over. I'm not sure what people's energy levels are, if we just plow on through or if we
I think
take
we've
a
only
break.
got 45 minutes left of what we expected to have today, so perhaps it's time to just keep moving through. Does anybody
Okay.
need a break? Do you want to put your hand up if you need a break? Look at, when I put my hand up, it has a little thing that actually automatically puts my hand up. I don't know if it does it for everybody, but anyway.
Okay, well,
Okay, let's move on.
I see Colin's hands up.
Oh, okay.
I would take 2 minutes just to corral some dogs, but
Oh, okay. Well, let's take 2 minutes then.
thank you.
I didn't check the actual time before we left.
We're at 2 minutes now, so we'll just wait until we see Colin there. He's back.
Are the dogs okay?
Yeah, I picked the wrong day to dog sit. So I have too many dogs here now.
All good. And actually, we'd asked Colin to give us a quick presentation a bit later, well, during today's discussion, and we want to make sure that we get to that. Okay, so the profit model analysis, whatever you want to call it, is really good at teasing out information for the left side of your business model canvas. And I really encourage people to, again, start your lists, put them aside, come back to them. And if you see something or you think about something while doing profiting, and then you realize, oh, I got to put this in my business model canvas, it's really easy to go back and list it out or to add it into to that canvas. And while you're thinking about your canvas, it might bring more thoughts into your profiting. And it's okay to go around. The point of this is that all of these are living documents that can be used at any time and really provide some rich information for anybody you want to share them with. McKinsey 7S. So again, just another maybe 5 minutes on this one after a brief explanation. This is another really good model that, but I find the most important part of it is that at the center of it all is the shared values piece. So any organization, because an organization is basically a construct in our minds, but any organization should have some form of structure. And so we're talking about that as an organizational resource. Are you structured? Do you have reporting lines, diagrams, operations, or processes that you have? So what does your organization have as a structure? what are the systems in place to actually execute, to do things, to get things done, to be able to deliver, to create, to disseminate? What's your style? What kind of organization do you have? If we think about Google, where everybody is allowed to go off onto, interminable breaks and beanbag rooms, coffees, I don't know, there's free canteen or what's the style of your organization, especially internally or seen as or perceived as externally? Is there a certain style associated with your organization? Who are your staff? Now, anybody who's on this call who works for an organization should be able to list out the staff that work for them. Maybe not if you're, I don't know, municipal government for Toronto, then you may not be able to list out all the staff, but you should at least know who your team is or the folks in your department. All of the people that actually work in an organization normally bring some form of skills, competencies, or intellectual assets. Can you list those out? And what is the overall strategy of the organization? So you've got the hard S's and the soft S's, but they all coincide and they should all support the organization's shared values. And I think that's the real value add for this framework, is that your shared values should be reflected in all of those different bubbles, and all of those different bubbles should support the shared values of the organization. So I don't know if we want to take 5 minutes to list this out. There are, and I'm very conscious of this, redundancies in these models as you move from one to the other, but it's also part of the process where one model will make you think of something, and then you can bring it back to the previous model or to the next one, and vice versa. So you're constantly going around, but it's helping you bring more information forward. And all of this contributes to a really healthy and rigorous organizational diagnosis so that you can have the information tools. And if you can list all of these different frameworks out, whenever you're onboarding new board members or new staff or volunteers, you have some high-level, rich information that you can pass along to them because you've already created the documents. So that's one of the uses that I have for all of these put together for my own organizations. So, do we want to go into breakout rooms, or are we done with breakout rooms for now?
I think we should not go into breakout rooms. I'm wondering if we can call on one person, and I'll share my screen. One of the people that we haven't heard from is Minerva, and so she has a lot of background in. So maybe Minerva, are you with us? And would you be willing to sort of help fill this out with me today?
Let me unmute myself. Hi, thank you, Kathleen. And I'm fine. First, thank you for having this, because I'm finding it really, really, really interesting. And all this is bringing something that for me has been close to home in all organizations that I have worked with, which is really understanding what we have and what we're lacking, like to move forward. And yeah, just understanding the resources, what we call resources, and I think Grégoire just called something. If there is not our resource, we're going to find it in our partnerships. So I think that these models really help making sense of all the huge amounts of information that nonprofits deal with, and nonprofits and in the arts. So
let's take a look at the El Sistema program that you were involved in, from the point of view of this McKinsey 7S. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and we'll see if we can't fill some of this in for El Sistema. So structure, did the London El Sistema program have kind of a staffing structure?
So we started as part of the steering committee at the beginning. So I can tell you where this started, and 6 years later, how that structure looked like when I left. It was one steering committee and one paid teacher. We had one classroom and we had 16 borrowed instruments. So we're sort of resources, not owned. 6 years later, we had about 90 instruments owned by the program, 6 paid positions for teachers, part-time but paid positions, 1 program coordinator, and one assistant coordinator. This is under the umbrella of that performance hall, which is the Aeolian Hall. So we were a program or run by like larger organization. So does that answer the kind of this
I think we
structure?
got this. Yeah, I think we got the structure there. Greg, did we get the structure there?
Yeah, so there would be a committee governance aspect, plus we've got some paid staff. And then we have, obviously, if it's an orchestra, there's some people playing, so we've got players involved there. So there is a structured approach to
yes,
the organization.
yes, then it would be 90 students at the end of that. 90.
Yeah, and this almost could be a copy paste towards the staff, because there are people that, you know, the conductor or the teachers and all that are paid staff. And so I think if we lead from structure to staff, we know we've got an easy way in there. And
yes, so a part of the structure is that was kind of a subset of larger organizations. So above that would be the executive director and the board of directors.
okay, so there's a board, so there's a steering committee, there's a board of directors, there's an executive director, and then there's the paid staff and the musicians. I was going to say kids, but the
yes, kids,
musicians.
6 to 17. Yeah.
Okay.
So yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
one
So we've
second.
already answered the staff question, which is awesome. And sorry, Kathleen's writing it. If I
I'm
can just
trying.
lead.
Go ahead.
So
That's
Let's go.
fantastic.
From staff, it's really easy to leap to skills. So the skills that are involved, I'm guessing there's your executive director. Maybe you're best to answer this, but would definitely have managerial, probably financial.
The executive director is actually fantastic. Like just the skill. He's a professional, like a musician, a pianist, and he's both executive and artistic director. So lots on his plate, but at the same time, all that there's always that balancing act of artistic decisions versus executive decisions. So in this particular case, falls under the same person. So playing on what's possible, what's financially possible, like viable, and that mandate and that vision, because he is the one driving both. So the skills is managerial leadership, PR, and then of course the music skills. So we had from yes, musicianship, and then each one of the teachers will be conducting, and then strings, and then we expanded to winds and brass, and a choir teacher. So singing, of course, theory, and so basically the specific music skills, but there is, I would say, because of you're talking about the organization. So yes, there are these skills that had to do with the like just administrative skills, and there is something that it is very easy to forget, and I find that this is one of the reasons why it's important to do this kind of models, is the value of the administrative skills, just the actual discipline to put everything in place in the right order, so we can put the right levels to actual skills. Fundraising, that's a good one.
Okay.
So
thank you, Minerva. I think we're just going to keep
yes,
trying to push through. I'm sorry, but we got
yes.
a little bit of time left. So
yeah, because there's an infinite amount of skills that we could tie to all these different people, and then creating that matrix of the conductor also, you know, has musicianship, pedagogical skills, would also be reflected in the teaching staff. And so, you know, you take the time you need to list all of these out and potentially tie some names to these skills, but it also helps you in terms of job descriptions when you want to recruit new people because somebody left, then you're able to identify the skills you've lost. If you were to look at style, what if I'll ask a leading question. If it's El Sistema, basically it's a grassroots organization that brings youth to play orchestra instruments. So could I say that, would it be fair to say that in terms of style, you're an inclusive organization?
Absolutely.
So those kinds of I'll say social elements could show up there. Now, in terms of musical production, is it I am the artistic director. I am making the decisions, and this is how we will be doing our performances and rehearsals? Or is it a little more collaborative?
I would say there is a lot of coaching and work put into developing those leadership skills in the younger people, like that be teachers or children. So there is a combination of I don't want to call it autocratic, but there is some general direction coming from the leadership, but people in the leadership positions encouraging leadership skills to be developed. So, and part of it is suggesting the pieces, suggesting what is the song that we want to do at the end of this. So there is, I would say, yes, there is a bit of decision making at the top from coming top down, but also encouraging collaboration and I would say transformational and coaching.
Yeah, so the organizational or the leadership or the business part of it has a bit of a top-down element. So there is either bureaucratic or autocratic leadership style, but the organization as a whole, and this would speak to the shared values, is there to nurture and to coach.
Yes, very
So
much.
now we're starting to look at some of the shared values. And if we were to say, sorry, we're just moving very fast along. So if we put shared values as nurturing and coaching, education, artistic appreciation.
And that's where the inclusiveness and diversity, education, inclusiveness,
with these beautiful, I'll say, shared values that are reflected in the style, this is where we see the McKinsey 7S model is really functional. And if we go back up to the diagram, which has the shared values in the middle, do the strategy, do the structure, do the systems, the style, the staff, and the skills all reflect those shared values? Do they support the existence of those values? And are those values well transmitted throughout the other six bubbles? And if there's a misalignment at some point, then we need to be able to explain it, or at least understand why that misalignment happens. Now, completely inclusive and very democratic style and structure and all that and shared values doesn't mean that at some point somebody has to make a decision. Doesn't mean that the president or the chair of the board has to say, sorry, we don't agree with this and we have to make a governance decision. It's not that everything has to be absolutely, tied to that or tied down. But as a general understanding of your organization, and El Sistema, I think, is a good example of that shared values piece has to be reflected in all the other bubbles. Because if you have a horrible conductor and teaching staff that are there to belittle the kids, it's not accomplishing its mission.
Absolutely.
And if you want an interesting expression, I knew a conductor once who said, conducting is being a benevolent dictator.
I have heard that before, yes. And to some degree is, setting direction. And in sometimes what I can tell you, one of the challenges in strategy and systems, which is left, is are these systems that we have in place or don't have in place serving this strategy, which is the vision that we want to go towards. And what I can tell you in my experience of those 6 years, and now outside of the organization, just as a friend, is some of the systems that have been implemented have been efficient at some point. They have never been enough to support the growth. So there is a constant search for, there is always something missing, because yes, the systems that are in place supported like 90 children perfectly well. But now there is more interest. So what's the system like that allows for growth? So I would say that what I have seen in over 10 years in this organization is the challenges supporting growth.
Greg, we have 25 minutes left for the entire rest
I'll
of
stop
the
talking.
program. It's okay.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I just want to make sure we're staying on time here. So.
And actually, your last comments, Minerva, were perfect and lead really well into the other stuff, which is sometimes you look at these theoretical models and realize, wait a minute, there's something wrong with our systems. In this case, we have some legacy piece that's still there. It's no longer functional because none of these things, all of these things exist as snapshots when we write them down. But society and life moves on. So it's not static, whereas this document is a little bit static. And then we can say, well, you know what? This system used to be right back in the day, but today it's no longer relevant. Let's change this system, or let's change our strategy. And sometimes we have to just recognize right now, I'm just making this up, El Sistema in London, there is no strategy. It's coasting by. That's the strategy. Okay, so this is a bit of a weaker point that we have internally, but so far things are good. We don't need to address that right away. It's not a problem yet. So sometimes identifying that missing piece, as I think it was Leslie was saying that earlier, is the important part that comes out of it. So these are static compositions that live in a dynamic world. So we want to keep them dynamic as well. Thank you for being the for using that as an example. Okay, so the last one that we have here that I will not go into great detail on, and we will not try to execute it. It was our attempt at trying to catch all of that into one go. And I will say the added value of this is simply kind of another reorganization of the same ideas. You've got, am I sharing? Yes? Okay.
Yep.
Every once in a while, I forget to do so. Again, kind of a bubble system. At the middle of everything is the raison d'être, the reason for being. You've got a mission, you've got objectives and values. Your vision, you can articulate and change it 50 times in the year, that's okay. But the fundamental pieces are mission, objective, and values. Why does the organization exist? What's the purpose? But in order to actually create and do things, you're going to need control, execution, and direction. There has to be some form of direction for the organization. Now, does that manifest itself in governance, administration, management, personnel? Can you list all those out? Do those terms actually mean something different to you, or are they all the same? Somebody was talking about having a very hands-on board that was actually the governance, but also the administration, the management, and the personnel that were executing the cultural goods or services that were offered out there. Control, not in the negative sense, but in the positive sense. We need to have some form of decision authority or infrastructure responsibility. People need to know that they are responsible and or accountable for things. Otherwise, everything's all loosey-goosey and nothing will happen. So there is a control aspect that's part of any organization. At some point, somebody has to accept what is being produced or delivered. On the execution side is that we actually have to do things. What are the processes, or operations that are tied to actual production? And to be able to see those production elements, we are going to need competencies and assets to be able to produce. So this is just one big catch-all system that can boil it down to one framework instead of using 4 or 5. But I think it's really good to use different systems to be able to interact with each other. The question is, it's kind of like when you start an email, your raison d'être. It's actually a French acronym. So the reason why you exist, your purpose, raison d'être, just like at the beginning of an email. What is this about? Does that answer the question? I lost the chat here. Yes, okay, good. So you have this and you can freely use this, and the administration box shows up as a gray zone because a lot of times it's either taken care of by the governments, the management, or the personnel. So however whatever those words mean to you, you might want to define it. I think one of the groups was doing that earlier on the business model canvas. We did have a poll, and I don't know if we want to throw it up. Where do you think you are in your organizational life cycle? If I was to answer, oh, okay, so I'm not answering anymore. Again, it's good to know because there's that interaction between the governance and leadership piece that can really depend on where you are within your organizational life cycle. So I'll let Kate tell us about the result of that poll. We already talked about this, so we can move on. So we'll just move on past the break here because we want to get to Colin and his I'll say report to us. But when we're thinking about those frameworks, they were very, very useful and serve towards organizational diagnosis and better cognizance of our own organizations and the elements that are part of our organization for, have a holistic picture of what we do. But all of this exists within a larger environment. Now, the pestle analysis, quite a few of you had mentioned that you knew about it before before we launched into this other stuff. I think we can share the results from the poll. It's good to consider ahead of time what are the political elements, environmental, social, technological, legal, or economic elements that you don't necessarily have control over that could really affect your organization. So if I just throw it out to, if you want to put it in the chat, please feel free to, or if you just want to give us a quick example, maybe a one sentence, what would be an example of a political factor that could impact your organization, whether favorable or disfavorable? Have any volunteers?
I mean, I will jump in, not from the point of view of CCNC, but in other organizations. For example, in BC, we had a very big change when I was at the Nanaimo Conservatory of Music to how the BC Gaming funding worked, and BC Gaming was funding all kinds of different things. So when a new government came in and said, hey, you know what, we're going to completely change how we're doing this, there was a huge impact on many organizations.
Yeah, I think Colin put.
In fact, one organization that I was working with actually failed because of it. The Kids Festival in Nanaimo completely failed to never come back.
Yeah. So political decisions can have a negative or positive impact on us. Are there any environmental factors that could have an impact on us? Okay, some people I think had some outside productions where if you're producing something in a park, well, with the change in environment, if there's an atmospheric river headed your way, there's a fair chance that you're not going to get an audience out to the park for whatever production you have. Um, Plastic is an issue now, and so many organizations that have a physical space are moving to eliminate plastic straws and have paper or bamboo straws. But that environmental decision, or if we ban something that is part of our necessary production for environmental reasons, then that could impact our bottom line, our cost structure, our revenue streams. And feel free to jump in anytime you've got an example. Social, are there any social items that could come up that would impact your organization favorably or disfavorably?
A lot of social isolation, where we have to reach individuals in isolated communities, so the reach is very difficult. So one of the social implications of working in the North.
Yeah, and if I may, that could lead into a technological problem. If you have a breakdown of technology, like we've seen, Rogers when they went down for a week or two, that had a huge impact on people. So people that are in remote communities that rely on, even if it's just a telephone, to be able to communicate, to coordinate, then you've lost that technological piece. It can have an impact on a certain social or demographic group. Any other technological? No? We do have a small list of ones that we put together, and some of them got a laugh out of people. But things like powerful storms now, which knock out power for a week or two. If you know that you're without electricity for 2 weeks, you may have to figure out a new way, maybe get some generators. You will need to find solutions if you're heavily reliant on something. Any legal changes that might really affect you. Okay. If we change the copyright laws and said streaming platforms need to pay 5 times the royalties they're paying now, a lot of artists would say, yes, payday. So I'm going to get 5 times what I was getting yesterday, tomorrow. But there might be a net effect where the funding or the streaming platforms say, we're going to pass that cost on to the end consumer. So the end consumer has to pay 5 times more, which may bring subscription numbers down, which could have the negative effect of making less revenue or income for the artists because people are paying more. So that could be a potential hurdle. It could be beneficial. It could be negative. Economic. We know that economic precarity can really influence, and some of these things, if for example, government decisions, funding change, it could be a political decision which will have a really economic impact or ramifications, but could also be tied to a social aspect. So all of these can be intermingled, and whether it shows up in one box or another, it could be up for debate. But I think listing out potential liabilities or vulnerabilities is really important. Now, if you're not certain how to pull some of them out, I would say go back to your business model canvas. Look at your key activities. look at your key resources and key partners, and all of those are basically vulnerabilities, because without those essential elements, you can't produce your value proposition. So what could negatively affect any one of those three boxes is likely explainable by a political, environmental, social, technological, legal, or economic factor. That was a lot of words in one breath. Okay, so we won't belabor the pestle analysis. And through the handouts that you got through Kate, you've got some ideas of things that may happen that could affect negatively or positively. We had asked Colin, and Colin, if you're up to it, we'd asked Colin to participate in this presentation because Steps Public Art was one of the stories that got featured in the 29, if I'm not mistaken, 29 featured stories through Kelly Hill's
Yes.
report. So I would challenge Colin in this case, if you're up to it, could you present to us what Steps did and where, in terms of business model canvas, so where the resilience effort showed up, how it was demonstrated by innovation or adaptation, who was spearheading the effort, and what resources were used to get to the positive outcome?
Yes, definitely. I was hoping there wasn't a test on all the acronyms, but.
Oh, Kathleen?
Greg, sorry, I think we need the next screen, the next slide.
Sorry, yep.
Yep, there we go.
Perfect. Okay, I'll just start giving like an overview of kind of what we did and why we did it, and then hopefully we can answer some of these questions here. So yeah, seeing how a lot of, as a result of the pandemic, a lot of events being closed, and as a result, a lot of businesses being closed, seeing a lot of empty storefronts and a lot of main streets being really shut down, and businesses closing, started a pilot program called the Main Street Challenge, which involved us leveraging some of our partners who we've previously had relationships with, like RBC, to really help fund and help support this recovery process for a lot of the main streets. And we've also always wanted to really engage and work in other parts. Our head office is in Toronto. We do have staff across the country now, which is great, working remotely, but it really enabled us to like focus on other areas and push that growth of the organization towards some of these smaller towns, specific, like for instance, Timmins in Northern Ontario. So working virtually, able to really help these BIAs activate their storefronts through artistic means, through whether it be murals, banners, other sorts of activations, which eventually led to a permanent program we have called I Heart Main Street, which now really works with these BIAs across the country. We just finished up a couple projects in Halifax, which is exciting, to really kind of activate these empty storefronts and bring people back to the areas. That's just a little overview. So maybe I'll just let you kind of guide me in what I'm missing here, maybe.
So if we look at this through an analytical lens, almost academic, you were definitely relying on some physical resources that weren't necessarily owned by you or the project. The storefronts that were unused became a physical resource that was readily available to be able to put, artistic work up there as part of a, continued art delivery of goods and services. You obviously leveraged some information and communication channels that you had to be able to get that done. There's definitely some reputation that was in there, because otherwise people, why would they take your call? Oh, we know this person, or we know this organization. Hey, they got some good ideas. Let's hear them out. So that reputation probably opened up some doors. The decision to move forward, and I would say there was probably ready stock of artists, the people involved and raw creation energy to be able to populate these disused storefronts. So there's physical resources involved. You launched into something new because I think before you were doing things that weren't tied to storefronts. So you were innovating. You were doing something new, doing different things rather than doing things differently, doing different things for your organization. And you found new customer segments, basically people to see and enjoy this art. So there's your story hits on a lot of these where questions, and how it manifested itself was by doing different things and in different places. So there's where double-sided, and what resources. There's a whole list of them that came out of your short account there. Who spearheaded the initiative though?
We did, yeah, through outreach, seeing the kind of need and desire of like wanting neighborhoods and storefronts to be or communities to be activated again. It was through a pilot program developed by SEPS.
See, and I really like the fact that it was a we initiative again. There were many people that were deciding. There was a lot of thought exchange. Roughly, how many people were involved in the decision process or the elaboration or innovation concept?
I would say majority of the staff. The staff has grown. I've been here for 2 years now, and the staff, I've seen it grown substantially. So I would say about like 5, maybe. That's I started just during the pilot program ending. So I would say probably about 5 or 6 staff were involved. And then all the staff had that leadership kind of component to the project itself, where it was a very driven project where each of the staff members had a couple BIAs they were working with. So everyone was involved, which turned into like a really nice kind of team sharing event too. So there was lots of problem solving, resources, and lots of opportunity for internal growth too.
Awesome. So we see a demonstration of collaborative leadership within the group that was doing it, but also collaboration with partners on the outside. And in some cases, you may have a very autocratic group doing collaborative work, or you may have a very collaborative group doing autocratic work on the outside. So again, these are just, I'll say, conversational elements that can help in terms of analysis. But thank you. That's a really cool story that you managed to share with us. Thank you. So I see the poll is up. I think we've got 2 people left to answer. In terms of success, so success can be defined in many ways, but we were really interested in how you managed to keep doing things, and so we've got this little poll that's up here. So just to kind of recap things, because we are heading towards the end of our 3-hour commitment. And thank you so much, everybody, for your participation. And in case I haven't said it, thank you to CCNC, Kathleen and Kate, who put all this beautiful project together and allowed CHRC to participate in it. It's been a lot of fun. I'm sad that it's coming to an end, but we'll find other ways to work together in the future. So again, if you want to look at this, where in your organization are you innovating or adapting? How does that effort show up? Is it doing different things? Is it doing things differently? And what resources, including the skill sets, will be tied to this? If we go back to that slide about the competencies that were tied to innovation from Colin's story, we can hear that there's definitely a design conceptualization. There's a very proactive approach. Let's use things that are not being used right now. Let's go out into the communities and get that ball rolling. So there's definitely a proactive stance, and again, design conceptualization and innovation. So we're trying to do something new. And what resources can be leveraged? There was a whole list of them in what Colin said. In 2 minutes, there was a lot that could be jotted down. Who can spearhead this initiative or effort is also a very, very important aspect, and who has legitimacy to do so, which can also lead to, just a thought. When you're in a nonprofit or a charity, you obviously have to stay close to your mission and objectives. And if you're going to be straying from that, who is allowed, or who is entitled, or who's authorized to authorize that, sidestepping from your mission or objectives? All good questions to think about whenever you're trying to launch into something new. If you've got your business model canvas nearby and all the other frameworks, they can really help you move faster towards a decision, solution, or articulating a new line of efforts. Kathleen.
I just wanted to say that CCNC basically followed that process for this program itself. We did a different thing. This wasn't a program that was going to serve our members necessarily, or it just actually more so serve our members in a roundabout way. And so we didn't have the benefit of your workshop, Greg, to go through and figure out what it was going to be, but this very much followed all of those items that also Colin was answering. and where did the leadership come from? And, you know, it was basically a collective decision amongst the board that, yes, we would take on this project. And so here's the fruition of that.
And actually, so that comment leads perfectly into the first paragraph here. The use of the business and conceptual frameworks wasn't necessarily a conscious thing that people were doing. Oh, I'm going to pull out my business model canvas. But the point of this presentation is that people have these tools to be able to use them whenever they want to call them up. So Kathleen's example is exactly what people went through, which is it wasn't on the moment, let's do this, but it really helps compartmentalize information and allows us to see cause and effect through this, and that the information that we have collected and all of these, you know, awareness pieces about our organizations really help us target or elaborate plans to address problems and formulate solutions. So we propose that people continue to use them, and it's not in a 2-hour, 3-hour time frame that you're able to do a very extensive piece of work on all of these. So we suggest that, you know, go back, and a lot of people have said, I'm going to bring this back to my board. One of the ways that I suggest people do this is if you've got a board, a group of people working on it, you're all very competent now to just deliver this for yourselves, for your own organizations, and say, okay, everybody sit down and we'll compare notes. Take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, fill out the business model canvas, and then we'll have a chat about it. So, oh, George over there, what's your take on our value proposition? Oh, Edith, what do you think about our customer segments? And any commonalities that people come to is most likely something that's an assumed truth now at this point for your organization, and any diversity in opinions could be debated. So we encourage the continued use of these and to evergreen them, because they can really help in your organization, your processes, and thinking about deliverables and outputs and solution crafting. The last little sentence here I will read, because this was part of the challenge, is that resilience isn't a concept, or it's a concept that's best understood at the intersection of crisis management and endurance. Risk-taking is an integral part of the journey and relies heavily on initiative. You can't really teach resilience. It has to be demonstrated, and its success lies both in the journey and the destination. So with that, we're a few minutes before the hour. Thank you so much for all the generous participation. Thank you to CCNC for launching this project and making this a reality. And thanks for including CHRC, and I'll say personally myself, this has been a blast.
Thanks very much, Greg. We really appreciate you and all the work that you've done in making this come together. And again, this video will be made into a training tool that people can use for self-professional development in the future, along with all of Greg's slides and his models as well that he's brought forward for us. So thanks again for everybody for participating today, and thanks so much to Kate for all of her back end work on this. We're very, very happy that it worked out so well. And to the people in the YouTube audience, thank you for being here and watching the YouTube, and we hope to see you sharing this information with more people, and we will share with you as soon as we have the links for the whole self training program